Chapter 246, Dual Attributes of Water and Fire, Heavenly Spiritual Roots. Bastard, if you have the abilities then don't hide. Do you think that just because you can hide, you can really avoid my attack? Feng Lianing gnashed her teeth, and with her figure blurring, a barrage of blazing darts flew everywhere. With the darts practically flying all around, no matter how fast she moved, it was impossible for her to dodge this round of attack. Internally overjoyed, the corner of Feng Lianying's mouth curled into a sinister smile as she imagined all the holes about to be poked into He, turning her into a sieve. However, the next moment, her wide smile froze. She watched as those burning darts, after gaining a few meters, suddenly seemed like they encountered something. Unexpectedly it slowed down their speed, and somehow, it began to force the darts to face a different direction, before they wobbled in the air and fell to the ground. Next, the flames slowly extinguished. When she saw this, Feng Lianying's face was so gloomy that it looked like it was almost dripping water, appearing particularly cold. He unhurriedly appeared before Feng Lianing once more, but this time, she was accompanied by countless clones that flashed into view one after another. Each one of the clones had a contemptuous sneer on their face, while a melodious and penetrating voice rang out carrying a cold murderous aura. Ice Lotus Fairy, your trick was only a so-so. This was a technique that He had used when she was still an assassin, illusionary step. Originally, if she would have used this technique on a martial artist with a high divine sense, it wouldn't have been effective at all. However, now that He had advanced, her spiritual power and speed had greatly increased. In this world of martial artists, only the swiftness of a person's speed defined the winner. Therefore, now that she was using illusionary step, even Feng Lianing on Gold Core stage was unable to see where He's real body was. Good, very good. I never would have thought that mere foundation establishment stage trash could have pushed me up to this point. The fury on Feng Lianying's face slowly vanished, transforming into a deep coldness. Loosening the grip of her right hand, her long sword worth several million spirit stones fell to the ground and produced a clang as it hit. It seems that you obtaining Zijin Palace's inheritance wasn't purely by luck. But since it's this way, it's even more reason for me to not allow you to keep on living. People like you would be a threat to me in the future, so it's better to eradicate you while you're still weak. Moreover, since you also attempted to seduce Brother Yu, if I'm unable to kill you today, I'll be in great trouble. The next moment, the shadow of a sword slowly formed in Feng Lianying's hand. But this sword was different from the previous fire attribute long sword. This sword's entire body seemed to emit the coldness of ice spiritual power. The sword flickered, and the spiritual herbs around the sword completely froze, and at a speed visible to the naked eye, the frost spread to cover the ground all around it. Zhou Yan'an cried out in alarm, the ice crystal sword. A top-graded weapon, the ice crystal sword. Don't you have fire spiritual roots? Why are you able to use the ice crystal sword? Feng Lianing slightly raised her chin, an arrogant smile breaking across her face. Why do you think this fairy can be called the 1,000-year unparalleled genius martial artist of Luli sect? It's because I have the rare dual attributes of water and fire, two of the heavenly spiritual roots of the world. Zhou Yan'an was dumbstruck. Dual attributes of the heavenly spiritual roots, where both attributes were completely unrelated. The dual attributes of water and fire, two of the heavenly spiritual roots, were represented when a martial artist practiced water and fire attribute cultivation methods. If practiced correctly, instead of each attribute cancelling each other out, it could result in each one complementing the other. If you were a martial artist with just one attribute of the heavenly spiritual roots, you were already considered to be a rare genius in the world. Yet Feng Lianing was a gold core stage martial artist with dual attributes of the heavenly spiritual roots. How could young master she ever hope to defeat this woman? Chapter 247, Paying the Price. If Zhou Yan'an were to know that He, who to his eyes had no chance of winning, possessed 5 attributes of the heavenly spiritual roots, his jaw would probably drop in shock. Feng Lianying's gaze was filled with contempt as she looked at He. Don't think that just because you were a little smart and have a tad bit of skill that you can regard yourself as a genius. Compared to a real genius, you're still far from that and remain as trash. Ever since this fairy got this ice crystal sword I've never let it touch blood, so today, the two of you can be the first. Consider it a privilege." Finished speaking, Feng Lianing brandished the ice crystal sword in her hand. Following that, crackling sounds were heard that could make anyone's teeth ache, and in the blink of an eye, it was as if even the air was frozen. Those shadows of Heshis dispersed into the air one by one, disappearing without a trace. Shortly afterwards, a figure who was running away was firmly frozen by a layer of ice and was completely unable to move. It was Heshi. Feng Lianing burst into laughter, quickly stepping forward. "I said before that I would certainly dismember your body. Brat, now you shall break apart with my capsule of ice." Feng Lianing raised the ice crystal sword, and fiercely threw it towards the frozen Heshi. However, before her sword could reach Heshi, the capsule of ice suddenly exploded with a bright red light. Feng Lianing was startled, but before she had time to react, she suddenly felt an acute pain in her abdomen. This caused her utter a miserable and mournful cry. At the same time she felt pain, her ice crystal sword had stabbed into Heshi's shoulder. The broken capsule of ice shattering into an icy powder that sprinkled the tops of their heads. Both of them had beautiful appearances, and under the fall of glittering ice dust, they seemed both stunning and breathtaking. But Feng Lianying's current expression was like she had met a ghost, terrified and filled with disbelief. The two of them were standing very close together. The dagger that had just been held in Heshi's hand was now nestled in Feng Lianying's abdomen, while Feng Lianying's ice crystal sword was deeply embedded into Heshi's left shoulder. Why? Obviously he had been frozen, but how was he able to thaw the ice capsule? Cold energy from the ice crystal sword slowly spread throughout Heshi's wound, but before it could completely freeze the left side of her body, the corner of her mouth curled up into a meaningful smile. "Ice Lotus Fairy, it seems that I forgot to tell you, it isn't only you who possesses a gift of dual attributes of the heavenly spiritual roots. Furthermore, you seem to have forgotten what I said before. If you injure my people, you must pay the price. Even if I'll die, I will certainly make you pay a big price first." "No. This is impossible." Feng Lianing screamed as she fell backwards. As the two separated, a squelch could be heard as the dagger and sword were pulled out of the pair, causing fresh blood to pour from their wounds. Feng Lianing covered the wound on her abdomen with her hands, her face filled with shock, resentment, and defiance. "No. I don't believe it. You're just trash, a useless person. How could you and I have the same innate skill?" It was at this point that Feng Lianing finally realized that Heshi had deliberately been frozen by her. This was in order for her to draw closer to Heshi and loosen her guard while thinking that she was winning. Just before, Heshi had used her formidable water attribute cultivation method, so Feng Lianing had thought she was a martial artist with a single water attribute spiritual root. Hence, she had never thought that Heshi would be able to escape with only her left side being frozen, until Heshi broke free. Heshi reached out her hand to briefly press down on several of her acupuncture points, blocking the cold energy from spreading further. She then used her fire's spiritual power to heat the cold energy corroding her meridians. Thus, her complexion became pale, and her body tottered on the verge of collapse due to the excessive use of spiritual power to halt the ice-cold energy invading her body. Chapter 248, Terrible Poison. But Heshi didn't stop to rest, and instead waved the white bone whip in her hand. Her aura picturesque as she flew over and appeared before Feng Lianing. Feng Lianing, who was immersed in her shock and hatred, suddenly snapped out from her thoughts with a burst of killing intent within her eyes. "Bastard, so you want to sneak attack me with your minuscule abilities? In your dreams." After speaking, about a dozen swords appears in her hand and she immediately charged towards the white bone whip. As they collided, the white bone whip was chopped apart inch by inch under the sword's swinging, falling to the ground like small worms. As Heshi's body was strongly pulled forward by Feng Lianing, she felt a palm harshly strike her chest. However, the moment the spiritual power reached Heshi's body she swayed, and like a kite that had its string snapped, she flew into the air before spitting out a mouthful of blood. Feng Lianing had missed Heshi's vital organs, but it was still enough oppression by immense spiritual power to make her qi and blood surge, as well as cause pain in her 5 internal organs. Feng Lianing sneered in loathing, detest, and contempt. At this moment, the wound on her stomach had started to recover, and she used her towering frame to look down at Heshi. No matter how hard you struggle, you're just like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Do you really think that with just your tiny cultivation base, that you can successfully attack me? You think I sacrificed my white bone whip and risked being injured in order to attack you? The corner of Heshi's mouth curled into a sneer as she continued, Feng Lianing, could it be that until now you still haven't realized that there's something wrong with your wound? Feng Lianing became alarmed and lowered her head to see the wound on her abdomen in disbelief, noticing that it had already started to coagulate with dark spots appearing around the wound. Her previously arrogant voice was now trembling due to fear. What did you do to me? Heshi supported her still stiff left shoulder as she stood up, laughing coldly. I only smeared the drop of an interesting poison on you. This poison initially had no effect towards you gold core stage martial artists. Since the moment you become poisoned, you just need to take the antidote and you'll be fine. But, Ice Lotus Fairy, apparently you let jealousy affect your mind. Now the poison has invaded your dantian and begun to spread throughout your meridians. How does it feel? This is impossible. How could your poison hurt me? Desperation and panic flashed on Feng Lianying's face. It must be known that martial artists of gold core stage were basically already immune to poison, unless it was highly poisonous like dense viper orchid which was manufactured by a high-level martial artist. Otherwise, a martial artist's body itself would naturally repel the impurities from the poison. But now her body had really shown signs of being poisoned, and the circulation of her spiritual power was also slowing down. That brat was nothing but foundation establishment stage trash. He seemed to be about 16 to 17 years old, so how was it possible that he could concoct such a terrible poison? The long sword appeared once more in Feng Lianying's hand as she aimed it at Heshi and screamed, "Bastard! If you don't want to die, then immediately hand over the antidote." Though Heshi's complexion was pale and her voice was weak, her face still wore an indifferent sneer. It should be me saying those words. If you want me to hand over the antidote, I can. Now kneel down and apologize for me. Very well. Did you think that with just an insignificant poison that this fairy would really be afraid? Feng Lianying's expression twisted, and suddenly, a dark red medicinal pill appeared on her hand. As soon as that medicinal pill appeared, it emitted a delicate fragrance. Even if you were to merely smell this fragrance, it could give anyone a feeling of their spiritual power becoming incessantly agitated. Chapter 249, Mutual Destruction. Feng Lianing held the red medicinal pill in her hand with a conflicted expression on her face. This red pill was called a red phosphorus pill. It was one of Lu Li sect's secret protection methods, and a pill that was used to save a life in a crisis. Once you took a red phosphorus pill, no matter how serious a martial artist was injured, it would heal in a flash. Regardless of being infected by any poison, it would also completely clear up. Even the user's cultivation base would rise in a short time period, with their spiritual power increasing several-fold. However, this powerful red pill wasn't without side effects. After taking a red phosphorus pill, the martial artist's meridians would be damaged to a certain extent, and they would lose the possibility of advancing for at least 3 years. Therefore, unless they had reached a moment where they needed to use it as a last resort, the disciples of Lu Li sect absolutely wouldn't take it. Feng Lianing had always been ambitious and lofty. Desperately pursuing Nangong Yu's steps, she had initially planned to advance to nascent soul stage within 10 years to be on an equal level with him. However, if she took this pill, her desire would become only a dream, because it would be impossible to improve her cultivation base in such a short time, let alone reaching nascent soul stage. But just the thought of Heshi, that bastard, as well as his and Nangong Yu's intimate scene, Feng Lianing was burning with the fires of jealousy, completely losing all rationality. So much so that she didn't carefully notice that at this moment, the poison that had been congealing in her dantian was slowly weakening and dissipating. After all, when He had made her poisons she was only at foundation establishment stage. So for a foundation establishment stage's cultivation base, being able to manufacture a poison harmful to a gold core stage martial artist, that was as difficult as wanting to ascend to heaven. If only Feng Lianing had been paying attention, instead of being blinded by her jealousy and fear, she would have known that the poison simply couldn't injure her. At most, it could only add a few dark spots on her skin. Feng Lianying's expression twisted, and suddenly raising her hand, she swallowed the red phosphorus pill. In the blink of an eye, her spiritual power increased sharply from the energy throughout the secret territory, giving off an ominous feeling. The ice crystal sword abruptly appeared in her hand once more, and Feng Lianying's body slowly rose into the air to hover in place. She then looked down in contempt and disgust at He and Zhou Yan'an below her, like she would stare at tiny ants. You made this fairy lose the inheritance, and made me pay such a big price by taking the red phosphorus pill. I swear that today I'll cut off your limbs and destroy your dantian, making it so that you'll spend the rest of your life as neither a person nor a ghost in a boundless hell. This is the price you have to pay for committing an offense against me, Ice Lotus Fairy. After her words, Feng Lianying's body shook, and the ice crystal sword fused together with her body as she charged straight towards He like a tornado. Zhou Yan'an exclaimed out loud, his face filled with despair. He pursed her lips as she stood her ground, a formidable spiritual power vortex slowly condensing in her hand. This spiritual power wasn't only her made of her own power, but part of her space's unimaginably vast spiritual power. Once this spiritual power vortex exploded, not only would He and Feng Lianing die, this entire area of the secret territory would be affected. However, He's expression only showed a cold determination. There was neither remorse or indecision, rather, there was a determination capable of destroying heaven and exterminating earth, a conviction to die in mutual destruction. She had said once before that even if she should die, she would certainly make Feng Lianing pay a painful price. That price was death. But, just as the condensation of her spiritual power vortex started spinning faster and faster, and the ice crystal sword in Feng Lianying's hand drew closer to her, a sudden scarlet light shone before He's eyes, blinding her. But before she had time to react, it enveloped herself and Zhou Yan'an. Chapter 250, Gu Lufeng. A loud bang echoed around the area, and the ice crystal sword very quickly turned into steam and evaporated into the air as it hit the barrier of red light. Additionally, the barrier of red light slowly dissipated from the impact of the ice crystal sword, similar to when ice and fire collided and melted. The next moment, Feng Lianying's body was thrown backwards far into the distance. And as she coldly and gloomy glared at the barrier of red light, it disappeared without a trace. Before He had time to react, Zhou Yan'an became startled and shouted in delight, "Young master, you finally came." Along with Zhou Yan'an's words, a figure in bright red clothes appeared in front of He. From He's angle she could only see that this person was slender and wearing a white mask on his face. Painted on the white mask was a queer ghost pattern, making the person look somewhat sinister. His pair of peach blossom eyes that weren't covered by the mask were gleaming like the reflection of waves under sunlight, a beauty that gave people a one-of-a-kind feeling of attraction. Once Feng Lianing noticed the white mask on the person's face, she couldn't help but cry out in alarm, "Gu Lufeng." Although He had never heard the name of Gu Lufeng before, she was very aware of Xingde Hall in Yanjing City. While its appearance was that of a small medical store, in actuality, it was a powerful intelligence organization. And the organization behind it mustn't be underestimated. And it could be assumed that the man addressed as young master by Zhou Yan'an was the owner of Xingde Hall. Gu Lufeng unhurriedly opened his mouth and said, "Ice Lotus Fairy, long time no see. I trust you've been well since we last met." Having heard what he said, the look on Feng Lianying's face twisted with fierceness. She didn't understand, all she wanted to do was kill a foundation establishment stage brat. It should have been very easy, but why did someone constantly appear to hinder her? Is that brat really so lucky? Feng Lianing grit her teeth as she answered, "Gu Lufeng, can it be that you want to meddle in my business too?" Granted that if you want to meddle, you have to consider whether or not your strength is a match with Lu Li's sect. Since Gu Lufeng was wearing a mask, his expression couldn't be clearly seen. But even so, his voice gave a sense of laziness and indifference. Fairy is so serious, the thing I dislike the most is meddling in other people's business. Similarly Gu Liufeng's people, also absolutely don't turn to other people to teach someone a lesson. I wonder how shopkeeper Zhou offended Fairy, to the extent that Fairy was using heavy hands on him. Feng Lianying's gaze shot back and forth between Zhou Yan'an and Gu Lufeng, a glint of coldness flashing within her eyes as she said, the one to start a feud with this Fairy wasn't really shopkeeper Zhou, but rather that foundation establishment stage stinky brat. So if you grab your man and leave now, making him vow to never reveal what happened today, I'll let you off. How is it? After Feng Lianing finished speaking, the look on Zhou Yan'an's face became apprehensive. He anxiously looked at Heshi and couldn't help but move his gaze to Gu Lufeng, taking quite a while before he mustered enough courage to say, young master, young master, she a debt for saving my life, I can't abandon him, no matter what. However, Gu Lufeng seemed as if he hadn't heard him. He just slightly narrowed his eyes as he stared at the arrogant Feng Lianing in front of him and faintly sighed. It seems as if Ice Lotus Fairy has misunderstood my intentions. Who said I asked you to let shopkeeper Zhou off? Hearing this, a smug smile graced Feng Lianying's face. Since young Master Gu understands the advantages and disadvantages, then that's for the best. Zhou Yan'an has dishonored this fairy, so he should be given a lesson. I can promise that this fairy will be able to keep his little life. Chapter 251, Hiding One's Ability by Keeping Quiet. The corners of Gu Liufeng's eyes twitched as he continued, what I mean is, Ice Lotus Fairy, is that since you injured one of my people, let me return the favor to Fairy in the same way you injured him. That way, the grudge between us can be considered as settled. You, Gu Lufeng, you're clearly unable to differentiate between good and bad. Feng Lianying's entire body was shaking from anger. If you were tactful you would scram, and if you don't blame me for being impolite. Your cultivation base is rather equal with mine, but since I now have the assistance of a medicinal pill, my power far surpasses yours. Do you really think I'm afraid of you? Gu Lufeng laughed lazily, his eyes gleaming brightly. Or, Ice Lotus Fairy could choose to make amends by apologizing to my subordinate. You're looking for death. Feng Lianing furiously screamed, her whole body like a shadow sword as it shot over towards Gu Lufeng. Currently, what she hated the most was hearing others ordering her to kneel down and apologize. Shiyu, that bastard, had humiliated her. In this lifetime she would never forget this. In the blink of an eye, two figures, one red and one white, were locked together in battle. The two people's movements were extremely fast as they flew about in the air of the secret territory. They were constantly using formidable spiritual pressure wantonly, causing bright lights to bloom in the sky. Zhou Yan'an watched on in a daze for a while. He felt a tightness in his chest, and although he was also a gold core stage martial artist, his current level wasn't enough for him to be a match in such a battle. Heshi watched on with an extremely serious expression, strangely able to follow the movements of the two people in the air. To her surprise, at this time the two seemed to be evenly matched in their fight, but she felt that Gu Liufeng's strength seemed to be far more than what he was exhibiting. Was he hiding it? Heshi frowned and seemed to be in trance, yet suddenly her eyes came into contact with a pair of eyes that seemed to be smiling yet not smiling. This pair of eyes resembled peach blossom petals. It was like they gleamed with the reflection of bright multicolored sunlight, but in a flash, these lights disappeared without a trace. Gu Lufeng. In such an intense moment of fighting, he was actually still able to be distracted enough to look at her. Moreover, those eyes contained a smiling expression that was deep and yet tranquil, as if they could see through her mind. Heshi suddenly lowered her head, a touch of contemplation sweeping across her eyes. Zhou Yan'an noticed Heshi bowing his head. With the side of his face delicate and pale, his whole aura was that of a frail yet beautiful porcelain doll that could shatter at any time. He couldn't help but comforted him with, "Young Master Shi, you don't have to worry, as long as my young master is here nothing will happen to us. Although he's only at gold core stage, he's entirely different compared to such a useless person like me. I've also never seen a martial artist on the same level beat him." He raised an eyebrow without answering, instead suddenly asking him, "Shopkeeper Zhou, we only met by chance and I have no affection towards you, so why did you want to risk your life to save me?" From the beginning He couldn't figure out this point. She could understand why Dandan and the little golden dragon would save her, but Zhou Yenan and her were only strangers by chance. Helping her might be normal, but risking his life to save her was really too strange. Zhou Yanan's face showed a trace of shame and indecision as he stayed silent for a long while, before replying, "To be honest, this humble one initially came to Zijin Palace to get the inheritance, but it wasn't for the Maha inheritance. Rather, it was to get a pill prescription from Zijin's master." Heshi's face showed her surprise. She had already received Zijin Palace's inheritance, hence she naturally knew that there wasn't any pill prescriptions included in the inheritance of Zijin's master. At most he only left her an extraordinary pill furnace in Zijin Palace. Chapter 252, Sheer, why are you here? Zhou Yenan continued and said, "But after seeing young Master Shi, this humble one suddenly felt that compared to a fabled pill prescription of Zijin's master, maybe young Master Shi is our real savior." Savior? What does he mean? Zhou Yanan's body was weak and his complexion pale, but at this moment, he got up from the ground and deeply bowed towards He. "Young Master Shi, to be quite honest, this humble one risked his life to save you because there's something I must request of you. Tell me." If this humble one didn't guess wrong, young Master Shi is the genius doctor who healed Ouyang's heir. Zhou Yenan was a little nervous as he looked at He, and it wasn't until she nodded in admission that he heaved a sigh of relief. He then continued and said, "After we leave the secret territory, this humble one wants to ask young Master Shi for help with saving a person." Zhou Yanan's words were extremely straightforward, and He released a long sigh. She was most afraid of being slyly schemed against and used as a chess piece. Shopkeeper Zhou's facade was plausible in how he dealt with business, but it was her most liked way of doing things. In any case, it was best to be clear about any business transaction over owing an unfathomable favor. Thinking up till here, He slightly raised her head and lightly said, "Okay, I agree to your request. It can be regarded as returning your favor of today." The 17-year-old youngster didn't have the slightest trace of hesitation on his face when speaking, and eyes were shining astonishingly bright. If such words were said to others, it would make people feel that he was arrogant. But in the case of this youngster saying it before Zhou Yenan, he felt that it was only right and hence he was incomparably happy and relieved. When the two of them were chatting, Heshi's expression suddenly changed slightly. She sensed many people coming in their direction, each of their auras very powerful and frightening. Furthermore, she didn't know whether it was a group of friends or foes. Just when she was about to warn Zhou Yenan and Gu Lufeng who was in the air, Feng Lianing abruptly uttered a pained screech. And like a kite being snapped from its string, she fluttered as she fell backwards towards the ground. Gu Liufeng's eyes filled with obvious astonishment, and then narrowing his eyes slightly, he revealed an interested smile. The next moment, a murderous aura as sharp as a sword charged straight towards Gu Lufeng. Gu Liufeng's expression turned slightly serious, replacing the previously indifferent expression he had when battling with Feng Lianing. With a wave of his hand, a blazing red sword appeared gripped in his right hand. Two swords then collided in high altitude, making an explosion of tremendous energy that caused spiritual energy to fluctuate throughout all of the secret territory. After the explosion, Gu Lufeng stumbled backwards a step and slowly fell to the ground. Because his qi and blood were boiling, blood as bright red as a cherry started flowing down his thin lips that were exposed under the mask. "Young master, you're injured," Zhou Yenan exclaimed, then struggled to get up to treat Gu Lufeng. Gu Lufeng smiled slightly, his deep gaze looking towards the people slowly appearing from not far away. His voice clear as he said, "His Highness Hell King's cultivation base is profound, you really do have a well-deserved reputation." Among the group of newcomers, many of them were gold core stage and above martial artists. In the front, a man dressed in a purple robe had anxiety plastered across his face as he held the deathly pale Feng Lianying in his arms, desperately shouting, "Little sister Lianying, are you okay?" Behind the purple-robed man, walking with an indifferent manner and a gloomy expression upon his face, was Nan Gongyu with eyes as cold as ice. Nan Gongyu's icy cold gaze swept over Gu Lufeng, and as they landed behind him, his eyes suddenly widened. "Sheer, how come you're here?" Nan Gongyu's voice abruptly became high, causing everyone present to almost jump in shock. Chapter 253, Why Can't I Be Here? His Highness Hell King's strength and identity were thought of as unattainable. His attitude to the outside world was always indifferent, cold, and unyielding. Even when everyone was rushing like ducks towards this dangerous sealed dragon domain, his attitude was like a skillful butcher with a cleaver. He didn't attach the slightest importance to any of the treasures. But at this very moment anyone who was observant could see how agitated Hell King was, how much anger and worry was contained in his voice. Qing Long, who was behind Nan Gongyu, held back the impulse to support his forehead. Why does his master become a completely different person every time he saw Miss Naylan? She, of course, saw Nan Gongyu. She had noticed earlier than Gu Lufeng and Feng Lianying that there were people approaching, but before she had the time to think any further, Feng Lianying seemed to have been seriously injured and fell, uttering a delicate yet miserable shriek. At first He felt that this was strange. The whole time Gu Lufeng hadn't been trying his hardest, while Feng Lianying had become quite powerful after taking a red phosphorus pill. So how could she have somehow been hit? It wasn't until she saw the purple-robed man holding Feng Lianying in his arms with a face full of rage, and Nan Gongyu following behind that she understood. Her heart filled with an "I see" sneer. So it was a staged trick. No wonder she would rather bear Gu Liufeng's blow, it was all for the sake of staging this scene. Didn't she see how angry and how distressed her brother Yu was now? Thinking up to here, a corner of Heshi's mouth curled into a cold smile. Your Highness Hell King and Ice Lotus Fairy could come here, so why can't I come? Or do you think this secret territory was opened by your Hell King manner? Nan Gongyu was dumbfounded. How long had it been since he'd heard Xia using such a cold tone when speaking to him? However, when Nan Gongyu's gaze fell to the wound that hadn't yet healed on her left shoulder and her small pale face, his heart tightened with intense anger and distress. How can this girl be so reckless? What kind of place is this sealed dragon domain? Even gold core stage martial artists were cautious when they would come, and yet she, such a delicate woman, actually dared to enter the inner layer of the secret territory. If something had happened, if... Nan Gongyu didn't dare to think any further, the fear and worry in his heart changing into an overflowing fury. It caused him to walk over in large strides to the little girl who watched him with a stubborn attitude. However, he barely took a step when the corner of his robes were pulled by someone, while in his ears came Feng Lianying's weak voice, "Brother Yu, I'm cold, so painful." Upon saying that, she abruptly began to vomit blood. Her beautiful face had become a deathly pale, it looked like she could die at any moment. The purple-robed man holding her felt distressed. Due to his worry, perspiration was rapidly dripping down his face, and seeing Feng Lianying clinging to Nan Gongyu, he couldn't help but urgently say, "Nan Gong, what are you doing just standing there? Quickly come and check on little sister Lianying's condition." Nan Gongyu didn't look back or turn to go see Feng Lianying, rather, he stared at Heshi with a burning gaze. The purple-robed man urgently said once more, "Nan Gong, don't forget what you owe towards the Luli sect. If little sister Lianying dies, your lifetime debt won't ever be cleared. You still won't think of a way to save little sister Lianying? Do you want to see her die?" Nan Gongyu's figure became slightly sluggish, before in the end he stopped and turned around to check on Feng Lianying's condition. Heshi coldly watched this play of Nan Gongyu turning around, squatting down, and enveloping Feng Lianying in his spiritual power. When she saw Feng Lianying's bashful and hopeful expression as she stared at Nan Gongyu with fixed eyes, her heart surged with a violent anger. Chapter 254, Troubling Young Master She wasn't angry with Feng Lianying's shamelessness, nor was she angry with Nan Gongyu's heartlessness. Rather, she was angry towards herself for actually being tripped over by a stone twice. She clearly knew that love and promises couldn't be trusted, yet why did she still care about it like a dimwit? And she clearly knew that she shouldn't be tempted, that she couldn't believe them. Yet why did she still allow other people to occupy her heart little by little? Hashi, in the end, what were you expecting? Were you expecting that Nan Gongyu would abandon his childhood sweetheart and come to you? Or that you would be enough to turn him against his childhood sweetheart? Ha, dream on. But since she had now woken up to reality, if she were to withdraw now it wouldn't be too late, would it? Hashi's hands tightly clenched into fists, not at all sensing her fingernails embedding themselves into her palms. Suddenly, a man's deep and magnetic voice entered her ears, TSK, this could be disastrous. His Highness Hell King and his bodyguard Qing Long, as well as Luli Sect's senior disciple Nie Jinchen, all of these few people possess at least the high-level strength of a gold core stage martial artist. His Highness Hell King is the strongest, so strong that no one can find out the depth of his strength. Now it seems that our situation is bad, really bad. Hashi came back to her senses and glanced at the man wearing bright red beside her. When she saw him say the words really bad, she noticed that his expression was relaxed and without a trace of worry. But when he withstood Nan Gongyu's sword attack, he had obviously sustained a heavy surge of spiritual energy. Now the bright red blood on his thin lips had faded into a pale color. Hashi suddenly reached her hand out and gripped his wrist, then started pouring her spiritual power into his meridians. Gu Lufeng was startled. By reflex he wanted to struggle and free his hand, but when he realized the way in which she was examining his condition, he couldn't help but show an interested expression. "You're the little genius doctor that Yenin mentioned?" But before Hashi could answer, Zhou Yenin had already replied. "Young master, it is him, genius Dr. Shiyu. His medical skill has reached perfection. Even Ouyang's heir was able to have his broken meridians healed after more than a year of disability. Believe me." Zhou Yenin hadn't yet finished speaking when Gu Lufeng took back his hand, preventing Hashi from continuing to examine him. Hashi didn't force him, instead indifferently saying, "If you want to completely dissolve the energy from the sword concealed within your body, I need to give an acupuncture treatment to your 3 acupuncture points, lung meridian, shoulder meridian, and back meridian." Gu Lufeng stared blankly, then fixedly looked at her for a moment before suddenly laughing. "Then I'll have to trouble young Master Shi." After saying this, he didn't mind in the slightest and took off his clothes, exposing the packed muscles and smooth veins on his naked upper body. Hashi stood behind him and nimbly started to insert the silver needles in her hand into his acupuncture points. Then her figure flashed and she came in front of Gu Lufeng, inserting the last silver needle into his lung meridian acupuncture point to slowly help the excess energy drain out. Hence Hashi's movements became very slow, while the thin and transparent silver needles held in her fingers lightly twirled. This was accompanied with the pure essence of spiritual power permeating into the air little by little. At this moment, Gu Lufeng sat cross-legged on the grass with Hashi slightly bending her body over him to rotate the silver needles with a focused and dignified expression. The natural light in the secret territory fell on the youth's fair face and shined upon his straight exquisite nose, pink and tender cherry lips, as well as long eyelashes that were as thick as a fan. The youth's head leaned forward slightly, his long shapely eyebrows lightly creasing. From Gu Liufeng's point of view he could see the youth's pointed chin, fair and slender neck, and the fine radiance slowly extending to his delicate collarbone, which then slanted to his slightly open robe. Chapter 255, Pull out your tongue. The youth's slender and fair hand was just like piece of carved jade as it gently hovered over his bare skin, while every so often the youth's cool touch would bring with it a throbbing feeling that made him shudder. Gu Lufeng felt a sudden skip in his chest, and bowing his head, the steady energy within his body suddenly surged and brought a bright red color to lips once again. His expression was calm, but in his mind a line continuously echoed, "This little genius doctor called Shiyu was rather too good-looking." As soon as Nan Gongyu crouched to examine Feng Lianying's condition, he immediately knew that she only had minor injuries. It simply wasn't as serious as the expression on her face suggested. With his face turning gloomy, he then got up and went to find He. Yet just as he did, his robe was once again pulled on by Feng Lianing. "Brother Yu, just then I had to take a red phosphorus pill to be able to compete against Gu Lu Feng. Later on, I won't be able to advance, right? Brother Yu, will you dislike me then?" Even with this remark, Nan Gongyu still didn't respond. However, Nie Jinchen's, the purple-robed man's, complexion changed, and with distress and anger flashing across his face, he said, "Little sister Lianing, didn't master say that unless it was a last resort, you shouldn't take a red phosphorus pill? Your innate skill is rare, taking a red phosphorus pill will encumber you for several years." Feng Lianing showed a sad and grievous expression, while her beautiful eyes gazed at Nan Gongyu as she choked on sobs. "I was all alone, while the other side had 3 people. If I didn't use a red phosphorus pill, I don't know if I could have waited until the arrival of you all and brother Yu. If I didn't have the assistance of a red phosphorus pill to allow me to hold on until this moment, I don't know how they would have humiliated me. They're going too far." Nie Jinchen roared with a gravelly voice. "Since they dared to hurt you to such a point, I'll make those 3 wretches pay you back 1,000 times over. Little sister Lianing, just wait, I'll go take revenge for you now." However, Nie Jinchen hadn't yet finished speaking, when Nan Gongyu's face darkened and he coldly said, "Shut your mouth." Nie Jinchen was startled and didn't react for a while. His face expressed a somewhat confused look. Nan Gongyu's cold gaze swept over him, and he unhurriedly stressed his words, "If you say wretches again, I'll pull your tongue out." The weather in the secret territory was warm, but Nie Jinchen felt so cold he was shivering. Nan Gongyu's gaze at this moment was too frightening. It was as if Nie Jinchen continued speaking, the other party would immediately tear him to shreds. However, Feng Lianying's pretty face twisted, intense jealousy and hatred glinting in her eyes. From his clothes, Nan Gongyu withdrew a bottle of medicinal pills and threw it to Nie Jinchen. "Give this pill to Lianing and use your spiritual power to unblock her meridians. After an hour she will be healed." Joy flashed within Nie Jinchen's eyes. If he had to use his spiritual power to unblock her meridians, then that meant that he and little sister Lianing would have to be in close contact. Nie Jinchen was the senior disciple of the head of the Luli sect. At such a young age he had already reached the peak of gold core stage, so it could be said that he had boundless prospects. Throughout Mi Luo continent there were many women who admired him, completely willing to be his concubine. But in Nie Jinchen's heart, he had always been attracted to his junior, Feng Lianing, no other woman. With regard to Feng Lianying's words, he took them as absolute truth and would never disobey her. Now that Nan Gongyu had given him an opportunity to get close to his goddess, how could he not be happy? Nie Jinchen poured a medicinal pill out of the bottle for Feng Lianing to swallow, but was fiercely pushed away. Watching as Nan Gongyu got up without hesitation and abandoned her, her heart was filled with extreme hatred. Chapter 256, What are you doing? Before having known Shiyu, that scoundrel, brother Yu had never treated her like this. He had never regarded her as nothing. If that bastard could disappear sooner, then that would be great. With this thought, Feng Lianing creased her brows and uttered a pained moan. Grabbing onto Nie Jinchen's sleeve, she said with a grief-filled voice, "Senior brother, all my life up until now, I've never suffered such a humiliation. Especially from that brat called Shiyu. He's a man and yet he actually wanted to seduce brother Yu. He even wanted me to kneel and apologize to him. When I didn't agree, they tried to kill me. Who gave them dog guts?" When Nie Jinchen heard this, he felt fury boiling in his heart, a murderous intent that burned him up. However, before he could finish speaking, he felt a severe fluctuation of spiritual power mixing with a tremendous amount of fury rage through the secret territory. In their ears came Nan Gongyu's demon-like voice, "What are you doing?" Although Nan Gongyu had seemingly been occupied by Feng Lianying's dying drama, in his heart, he had only been thinking of He. After he had confirmed that Feng Lianing was merely exaggerating a minor injury just to get his sympathy, he immediately became fed up. But, just as he turned around, he saw a scene that made him burn with jealousy. The scene was of the naked upper body of a young man wearing a mask, which revealed a smooth torso, while a beautiful youngster bowed his head and stared attentively at the man's body. The distance between the two was close, so close that their breaths were mingling. It was almost as if in the next moment they would intimately embrace each other. Nan Gongyu felt a fiery flame soar in his heart, burning it. This flame seemed to carry with it thistles and thorns, mutilating his heart. On one hand he was angry, while on the other hand he felt the heartache and hatred of being betrayed and abandoned, making him want to tear up everything in sight. The moment Nan Gongyu had shouted, it just so happened that He had been cleaning the energy within Gu Liufeng's body, slowly pulling out the silver needle that was inserted in his lung meridian acupuncture point. But abruptly she felt an immense amount of spiritual pressure in the atmosphere capable of crushing people. After all, her cultivation base was only at meridian stage. This, coupled with the injury she had received before, using up her spiritual power, and now a formidable spiritual pressure attack, all caused her complexion to pale in an instant. The next moment a blazing shadow enveloped her, this tall figure blocking her without hesitation. She heard Gu Liufeng's concerned voice reach her ears, "My clothes are made from special ice silk, it can withstand most spiritual pressure and divine sense attacks. If you drape it over your shoulders you'll feel much better." He was startled as the crimson robes were wrapped around her. A slight trace of warmth and fragrance wafted from the clothes, making the uncomfortable feeling of a moment ago disappear in a flash. While Gu Lufeng was now only wearing white inner clothing, his aura seemed leisurely and graceful as he nonetheless firmly protected her behind him. Gu Lufeng faced Nan Gongyu, the sound of laughter clear in his voice. "Your Highness Hell King, I've always respected you as a hero of Jinling Kingdom, but now you're unable to distinguish the truth from lies and have listened to woman's slander. I'm afraid that isn't very wise, right?" How could Nan Gongyu pay attention to what he had said, when his heart and eyes were only filled with the sight of this man and He standing very close together? Furthermore, this man had even dared to drape his clothes over He's body. His complexion was so glacial it seemed like water could be squeezed out of it, while his voice was like a demon's from hell. Immediately get away from her. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless." Chapter 257, Oscar winner Gu Lufeng was startled. He felt that Hell King's attitude was very strange. But before he could speak, He pulled on his sleeve and stood in front of him. She then coldly said, "Move aside, this has nothing to do with you. The person they want to deal with is me, so you should take shopkeeper Zhou with you and leave now." Gu Lufeng ignored her and heedlessly walked up to stand by her side. "You don't know this, but from the moment Feng Lianing and I fought, our fates became intertwined. That shameful woman is so petty, do you really think that she'll let us off?" He's brows wrinkled, and glancing at the faint spiritual power fluctuations of Zhou Yan'an next to them, her voice became gloomy. "Sorry, it's because of me that the two of you have become involved." As Gu Lufeng tilted his head to look at the side of He's beautiful, snow-white face, he could feel his heart softening. It was as if there was a warmth slowly building in his chest. But before he could say something again, his expression suddenly changed. His hand that had initially moved to console He was abruptly pulled back, and he staggered backwards several steps. A sharp, sword-like energy fiercely struck his body and he fell to the ground. This made grass bits fly everywhere, some fluttering to land on He's hair and clothes. Gu Lufeng lifted his gaze, only to meet with Nan Gongyu's dark and fearful glare. It was in these eyes that he saw a murderous rage, one that seemed as if Nan Gongyu wanted to dismember him, crushing his bones and scattering their dust. The next moment Nan Gongyu changed his line of sight, looking from him to the point next to him. Glaring at the pale complexion of he slowly extended his hand. "Sheer, come here." He coldly looked at him, the look on her face like condensed frost. "Go over there, what for?" "To allow you, Your Highness Hell King, to kill me and take revenge for your beloved little sister Lianing." The look on Nangong Yu's face was beyond ugly, and he suddenly walked forwards a step before darkly saying, "Sheer, in your heart." His words hadn't yet finished, when Feng Lianing, who had previously been lying on the grounds acting like she was on her last breath, stood up. With Nie Jinchen's support, she went to Nangong Yu's side and grabbed his sleeve. "Brother Yu, don't be like this. Young master, she didn't purposely injure me, you mustn't blame him." He looked at the intimacy of the two people, and the coldness in her eyes became colder, little by little, like a 1,000-years-old glacier. Such a pure and kind-hearted white lotus. Look at that emotion in her eyes, that expression, and that tone. If this act had been seen in her past life, then Feng Lianing would definitely have been suitable to win an Oscar. In front of people she appeared pure, cold, and noble, but behind their backs she was malicious and fierce. And now, she had managed to change once more by becoming delicate and pitiful. A man would unconditionally believe her and want to cherish her, wishing to hold her in their arms. Nangong Yu was also a man. With such a beauty throwing herself into his arms, how could his heart not be moved? As she sneered at her own thoughts, Gu Lufeng suddenly leaned towards her and whispered in her ear, "Little Yuer, do you know if there's a problem with that fairy's eyes? Obviously it was me who injured her, yet why is she implying that it was you who injured her? You're only foundation establishment stage, while she's gold core stage. By saying that it was you who injured her, isn't she afraid of losing face? Little Yuer. Where did that stupid nickname come from?" She aimed a glare at him, then looked back at Feng Lianing and sneered, "You say that as if she wasn't injured by me, and that she hadn't hurt anyone before me. So what if she was a gold core stage martial artist? She dared to provoke my people. Even if she herself wasn't a match with Feng Lianing, the least she could do was make her pay a price of being skinned alive." At this moment, Feng Lianing was wearing a white dress stained with specks of crimson blood, while her complexion was deathly pale. As the wind blew, it caused her white dress to flutter, making her appear like a willow, all delicate and charming. Chapter 258. Don't touch her with your dirty hands. Upon hearing Heshi's remark, rage flashed in her eyes first, before glistening teardrops welled in them. Pulling on Nangong Yu's sleeve, it seemed as if she had suffered an enormous grievance as she bit her lip and said, "Young Master Shi and Young Master Gu's relationship is really good. I'd heard that Gu Liufeng's conduct was usually arrogant and unsociable, yet today you unexpectedly agreed with Young Master Shi to regard me an enemy. The friendship between the two of you is really enviable. However, since I'm considering giving Young Master Shi face, I won't bother dealing with Gu Lufeng. You'd better go, quickly leave before Brother Yu gets angry. Rest assured, I will try my best to appease Brother Yu." Though she'd said it in a lovely and pitifully manner, provocativeness and bragging was visible in Feng Lianying's eyes. As she looked at Heshi, a coldness appeared in her eyes that quickly disappeared, and when she turned to look back at Nangong Yu, she acted gentle and kind-hearted. Nie Jinchen was still supporting her on the side, and his face had long become flushed due to anger. Having heard everything she was saying, he could feel his rage growing. "Nangong, don't listen to little sister Lianing. She was too kind-hearted, and that made some people who are unable to tell good from bad dare to have such ideas against her. Such vicious people like these, they shouldn't be spared. Let them know how people end up when they commit an offense towards people they shouldn't offend." Gu Lufeng clicked his tongue in praise, and putting a hand on Heshi's shoulder, he sighed, "I've seen shameless people, but I've never before seen one so shameless. I never would have thought that the famous Hell King would actually fancy such a disgusting woman. Really, seeing it for yourself is 100 times better than hearing it from someone else. Little Yuer, I think it's better that we don't get involved with this bunch of insane people. They're so shameless that it's unbearable to watch. Since we aren't their match in strength, we might as well take this opportunity to run." Having said that, Gu Lufeng leaned close to Heshi's ear to seemingly tease her, and whispered, "In a moment I'll count to 3. You take Yenin behind me and hide, we only have one chance to escape." Heshi nodded, but when she raised her head she met with Nangong Yu's burning gaze, causing her chest to feel like it was being crushed by a heavy stone. Suddenly, Nangong Yu walked towards her with large steps. And because Feng Lianing was still latching onto his sleeve, she ended up stumbling due to his abrupt movement. She watched Nan Gong-yu's back in disbelief as he left with quick strides, and she immediately shouted loudly, "Brother Yu." However, Nan Gong-yu's pace didn't pause in the slightest, it even seemed as though he didn't hear her. Seeing Nan Gong-yu walk towards them, Gu Liufeng's face became grave. So leaning closer to He Shi's ear once more, he went to whisper to her. All of a sudden, lightning appeared out of the blue to fiercely strike Gu Liufeng's arm. Staggering a step backwards, he uttered a muffled groan. The arm that had been struck by lightning now a bloody sight to behold. Nan Gong-yu glared at him with a ruthless and bloodthirsty gaze, his voice dark and cold as he spat out from between his teeth and lips, "I said, don't touch her with your dirty hands." Gu Lufeng was startled, but before he could react He Shi had already grabbed his injured arm, quickly spilling a silvery white medicinal powder onto the wound. In the blink of an eye, that bloody wound rapidly stopped bleeding and healed. Following that, in such a short moment, it had already become a scab. He Shi heaved a sigh of relief, and asked him in a somewhat concerned voice, "Are you okay?" Just as those words left her mouth, she felt something tightly wrap around her waist. But before she could realize what was happening, her body soared into the air to land in a warm embrace. When she raised her head, her eyes met with Nan Gong-yu's bloodshot eyes. Chapter 259, How Could I Kill You? The eyes glaring at her were frighteningly bloodthirsty, and paired with such a murderous aura being exuded from his body, it could make anyone tremble from fear. It was as though in the next moment that she would be torn into shreds and devoured. He Shi's heart sank little by little, while the corners of her mouth curled into a forlorn yet mocking smile. This man, does he hate her now? Does he hate her because she injured his beloved woman? Those previous sentimental feelings, those previous promises, in front of his beloved Ice Lotus Fairy, does he regard them as? Nan Gong-yu raised her chin, then slowly said, "Sheer, I just told you to come to me, didn't you hear me?" His voice was exceptionally gentle, but when it reached her ears, it caused her to shudder. She wanted to step away from him, but her entire body was enveloped by a tremendous amount of spiritual power pressure, leaving her unable to move even a single step. This was her first time directly experiencing Nan Gong-yu's formidable strength, helping her to understand how it made despair grow in a person's heart. Feng Lianing suddenly raised her voice and shouted from where she was standing not too far away from them, "Brother Yu, I know you're angry on my behalf, but young Master Shi is your friend after all. Please, consider my reputation and don't make things too difficult for them, okay? Young Master Shi didn't intentionally injure me, I believe he certainly knows his mistake." After saying this, she then turned to shout at He Shi, "Young Master Shi, quickly admit your mistake to Brother Yu. Otherwise, when Brother Yu's anger explodes, even I won't be able to stop him. Do you want to just helplessly watch on as your young Master Gu dies in Brother Yu's hands?" He Shi sneered upon hearing that, and a lustrous purple shade gleamed within her jet-black phoenix eyes. She then firmly stared at Nan Gong-yu as she said, "Is this your purpose for calling me over? It was to kill me to take revenge on behalf of your close female friend? Nan Gong-yu, am I that foolish in your eyes, so foolish that I'll obediently send myself to you and let you kill me?" Nan Gong-yu's entire body shook, and his arm that was wrapped around her waist tightened as he said in a trembling voice, "Sheer, what nonsense you are talking about? How could I kill you?" Just hearing her say that and thinking that this girl might die in the secret territory, he was so scared his blood turned cold. Sheer would actually go so far as to say he would kill her. "Young Master Shi, I said earlier that I won't let Brother Yu kill you, so why do you have to misunderstand me?" Came Feng Lianying's tear-filled voice. "Wasn't it enough that you had Gu Lufeng try to kill me? Yet now you also want to slander me in front of Brother Yu. Why do you hate me so much? Little sister Lianing, why you have to say so much to such a person? Just let me go kill him to avenge you." Nie Jinchen had reached his breaking point and he shouted at Nan Gong-yu, "Nan Gong, you still haven't quickly killed him yet to avenge little sister Lianing? Don't tell me that you really want to see our Lian Ying that has always been protected since childhood suffer such a grievance. Nan Gongyu's face twisted upon hearing Nie Jinchen and Feng Lian Ying's words. The murderous intent within his eyes seemed to condense into a storm, as though at any time he could tear everything apart before his eyes. However, before he could make a move, a red light as sharp as a sword suddenly flew before Heshi. Latching around her waist, it quickly pulled her out of Nan Gongyu's embrace. Gu Lufeng caught Heshi in the air, then steadily descended to the ground. Shoving Heshi behind him, he coldly said to Nan Gongyu, "Your Highness Hell King, are you really unable to distinguish right from wrong today by being used as a tool by that woman? Get lost. My matter with Shi'er has nothing to do with you." Heshi tugged on Gu Liufeng's sleeve, her face cold as she said, "Don't meddle again. The person they want to kill is me, this has nothing to do with you and shopkeeper Zhou." Chapter 260, Stay Your Hand. Although Gu Lufeng said that he had a way to escape, as long as Nan Gongyu pursued them, in the end she would still be involving them. This being the case, then it was better that she settled it alone with Nan Gongyu. Anyway, even if he really did want to kill her for his beloved little sister Lian Ying, it was only killing one person, that's all. Gu Lufeng revealed a reckless and uninhibited smile on his face as he spoke in a clear voice. "How could it have nothing to do with us? Today, since I see you as pleasing to the eye, I'm regarding you as my, Gu Liufeng's friend. Since we're friends, your matters are naturally my matters too. How could I abandon you here alone?" After saying that, he stepped forward a step to block Heshi from view, then said to Nan Gongyu in a gravelly voice, "Dignified Hell King, do you really want to place your hands on a weak teenager whose strength is so much lower than yours? If this news was to spread, aren't you afraid that you'll become a joke of the whole world?" Nan Gongyu's gaze fell on Gu Lufeng. His cold, tyrannical gaze made Gu Liufeng's back tense in a split second. "You think you can stop me?" Upon saying that, Nan Gongyu raised his right hand. This caused an invisible force to sweep towards Gu Lufeng. Gu Liufeng's complexion changed, and he started working the spiritual power within his body to bring forth his weapon. However, between the span of 2 breaths, his body and spiritual power seemed to be confined by something. There seemed to be a formidable energy encircling him, making him unable to use any spiritual powers. The most frightening thing of all though, was that his body began to uncontrollably move forward, as if there were invisible hands controlling his body and quickly pulling him towards Nan Gongyu. The next moment, Nan Gongyu's palm suddenly clutched Gu Liufeng's neck. His look was extremely calm compared to a moment ago, but the storm contained within his eyes seemed to be able to destroy heaven and earth. Drops of cold sweat seeped out from Gu Liufeng's forehead. In this very moment, he was clearly aware that the man in front of him really wanted to destroy him. Why are you near her? Why are you standing in between Shi'er and I? In this world, anyone who futilely tries to snatch her away from me will die." Having heard that, Gu Lufeng was startled, shock appearing in his eyes. What was the meaning behind His Highness Hell King's words? Wasn't he getting revenge for that black-hearted White Lotus? The hand gripping his throat suddenly tightened, and Nan Gongyu's body exploded with a burst of formidable spiritual pressure and a murderous aura. It seemed that at any second Gu Lufeng would meet with a violent death. "Don't do it. Young master. Nan Gongyu, stay your hand." 2 voices echoed at the same time. Zhou Yan'an's face was filled with fear and despair. Almost without thinking, Heshi summoned an ice sword to her hand, and charged straight towards Nan Gongyu and Gu Lufeng. No matter what, she couldn't involve Gu Lufeng and allow him to die for her in this secret territory. She, Heshi, disliked most the feeling of owing someone else, let alone the price of a life. The ice sword charged straight towards Nan Gongyu, drawing dangerously close to his heart and chilling him to the bone. Nan Gongyu turned around to avoid the attack. With his eyes staring fixedly at her, his icy cold, gloomy voice was filled with hoarse disbelief and heartache as he asked, "You actually want to raise your hand and fight me, for another man?" He was engulfed by the swirling storm and pain within his eyes, causing her heart to become stifled as she saw this. Tell me. Do you really want to attack me for another man? He's face paled, and the tense grip of her hand around the sword loosened. However, seeing an insidious smile on Feng Lianing nearby, as well as Gu Liufeng's slightly swollen and purple complexion, her expression quickly became cold. I said before, didn't I? Since Feng Lianing was injured by me, if you want revenge for her, then this has nothing to do with Gu Lufeng. Chapter 261, Why didn't you dodge? Nan Gongyu looked at her in a daze, as if he had lost his soul. Suddenly, his throat lightly vibrated as he started to quietly laugh. Yet no matter how you listened to this laughter, it seemed to be oppressive, like the warning to an approaching hurricane. Is that what you think? You think the reason I wanted to approach you was to kill you in order to avenge her? In your heart, you've never believed in me, have you? Everything that I've done for you, was it all just meaningless to you? Is your heart made of stone? He's face turned pale, as it felt like a hand had suddenly grabbed her heart and squeezed it. Her reason told her to never again believe Nan Gongyu, to never again open her heart. However, the Nan Gongyu before her eyes currently had an expression filled with depression and despair, like he was being abandoned by the world. Yet just at this moment, her ears abruptly heard Nan Gongyu's dark and hoarse voice, do you really care about this man? Care about him so much that you wouldn't hesitate to be hostile towards me? If that's so, then he must die. After he spoke, a dark thunderstorm condensed in his left hand, before he then fiercely threw it towards Gu Liufeng's dantian. He's expression abruptly changed while she seemed to hear a loud bang in her mind. With her body instinctively moving as fast as a shadow, she savagely thrust the ice sword in her hand in front of her. A squelch could be heard as the edge of the sword was thrust into a body. Apparently it was only a quiet sound, but to He it was like a clap of thunder echoing in her ears. He was so frightened she immediately released the sword in her hand, and she stared straight at the bright red stain spreading across her vision. Her always calm and collected face revealed a horrified expression for the first time. More than half of the sword made from ice was now piercing the left side of Nan Gongyu's chest. When He released her hand, the sword was lacking the support of her spiritual power and slowly turned into liquid, mixing with the blood as it dripped down. He felt her throat dry up. The voice that forced itself out of her mouth was hoarse and strained as she asked, why didn't you dodge? Nan Gongyu slowly released his grip on Gu Liufeng's throat as his eyes unwaveringly looked at He. The weather in the secret territory was as warm as spring, but at this moment, the surrounding vegetation began to rapidly wither and the air filled with a terribly cold atmosphere. The eyes of everyone present were filled with fear and shock. Those with low cultivation bases were even trembling in fear. He suddenly took a step forward, shaking as she asked, "How's your wound?" Looking at the position of the wound, it shouldn't be near the heart, but there was an extreme amount of blood indicating that the injury was near an artery. Even for a martial artist this wasn't a minor injury. Nan Gongyu, why didn't he dodge? However, He had just stepped forward, when a sudden force fiercely knocked her aside. She staggered twice and almost fell. Her ears then heard Feng Lianying's distressed cries, "Brother Yu, are you okay? So much blood keeps flowing, how could this happen?" As she said that she glared tearfully at He, then bitterly shouted, "Young Master Shi, how could you harm him? Brother Yu has always been kind to you. You actually injured him for a stranger, even if you have a shameful relationship with Gu Lufeng, doing this was too much." After saying this, she then turned and looked at Nan Gongyu's wound. As she watched the bright red blood pouring from the wound, translucent tears slowly trickled down her cheeks. "Brother Yu, don't worry, I have the best medicine for your wound in my possession, it will certainly heal you. Such a cruel, wicked, and ungrateful person, we definitely won't be having any encounters with him in the future." Chapter 262, It has nothing to do with you having heard that. He's eyes darkened and she turned to walk towards Gu Liufeng's direction. "Where, do you think you're going? A roar suddenly echoed around them, seeming as if it would rip apart heaven and earth, while a formidable amount of spiritual power pressure erupted from Nan Gongyu's body. Feng Lianing was caught off guard as she stood beside him, and she went flying into the air like a kite with its string snapped, crying miserably in shock the whole time. Nie Jinchen immediately caught her in his embrace, asking in a concerned tone, "Little sister Lianing, are you all right?" Feng Lianing, however, pushed him away and rushed back towards Nan Gongyu. Brother you, I'm Lianing. Let me see your wound." However, before she could get near Nan Gongyu, she was once again sent flying into Nie Jinchen's embrace. Feng Lianing was shocked to discover that Nan Gongyu was now in the center of an invisible spiritual barrier that he had formed, and Heshi was inside the spiritual barrier with him. Nobody could get close to the pair, but Heshi couldn't escape either. At this very moment, apart from Heshi, no one else could enter Nan Gongyu's eyes. Why? Why does brother you only have eyes for that bastard? What's so good about that brat? He injured brother you, but instead of brother you killing him, it seems that he's using every possible means to keep that bastard by his side. Feng Lianing bit on her lower lip hard, so hard that she didn't even realize the blood slowly starting to trickle down her chin. And so now that Heshi was trapped inside the spiritual barrier, before she had time to react, Nan Gongyu's figure abruptly moved and appeared before her in the blink of an eye. And slowly, he started approaching her step by step. His stature was tall and slender, with a handsome face that could make every woman in the world captivated with him. But at this moment, his face was positively glacial, like it had gathered thousands of years' worth of ice. This matched his body, which exuded a terribly dark aura. As he slowly approached Heshi, the blood from his chest exuded a strong metallic smell. This, in contrast to his pale and handsome complexion, made him seem like a fallen demon king. "Sheer, where do you think you're going? Are you going to that man? Is he that important to you?" Heshi's complexion paled. The immense amount of spiritual power pressure being emitted from Nan Gongyu's body was making it extremely difficult for her to breathe. However, when she met with Nan Gongyu's rage-filled eyes, her stubbornness stirred, and she raised her small chin into the air as she coldly said, "In regards to whoever I want to go to, it has nothing to do with you." "It has nothing to do with me." Nan Gongyu took a step forward, and in the blink of an eye he arrived in front of Heshi, tightly gripping her shoulders as he asked, "Then who does it have anything to do with, Gu Lufeng?" Heshi bit her lip, her expression icy and unbending as she hoarsely said, "If yes, then so what? You can go back to your beloved Ice Lotus Fairy, so please don't interfere with my life from now on." A scarlet blaze suddenly ignited within Nan Gongyu's eyes, and the atmosphere around him was abruptly filled with a crackling noise that echoed all around them. At the same time, terrible dark clouds covered the sky of the secret territory, layer by layer. In an instant it seemed like it was about to rain, and that a major catastrophe was about to occur. Heshi's face was filled with shock, and without having a chance to speak, she suddenly felt extremely dizzy. It was like her body was being drawn into a powerful vortex. The enormous amount of spiritual power within the vortex constantly fluctuated as it pulled at Heshi's body, making her feel like she would be torn apart at any moment. However, very quickly, she felt herself being held in a warm embrace. That embrace emitted a formidable amount of spiritual power pressure that enveloped her and blocked all the pain that she was experiencing. She then vaguely seemed to hear a man's gloomy voice echo in her ears, and it was tinged with a slight amount of exasperation and deep love. "Sheer, you're mine. You'll forever be at my side." Chapter 263, Infidelity. Heshi drowsily opened her eyes as she felt the breeze caress her cheeks and tease her hair. As she went to move her hands and feet, she instead felt her body being restrained by something. When it sensed that she wanted to struggle, whatever was confining her seemed to tighten. Looking up, Heshi saw Nan Gongyu's pale and handsome, yet cold complexion enter her sight. She was so shocked that she started struggling harder to free herself. However, Nan Gongyu's hands were restraining her and he tightened his arms around her body. "Nan Gongyu, let me go. Dream on." Nan Gongyu replied coldly. I said it before, but in this lifetime only you can be my princess, and only you can be my woman. If you dare to get close to other men, then I'll kill all the men around you. He was annoyed and grit her teeth as she retorted, Who's your woman? Wasn't your woman your beloved little sister Lianing? Since you like to imprison people, you can just go back and lock her up to prevent her from randomly disturbing people. Nan Gongyu lowered his eyes as he looked at He. His expression was like condensed frost as he said in a somewhat helpless tone of voice, When have I ever said that Feng Lianing is my woman? In this lifetime, I've never even touched a woman's hand. The only woman who I've ever been intimate with and touched is you, Sheer, who'd believe you? She suddenly started moving her spiritual power about, intending to struggle free from Nan Gongyu's embrace. But when she fell to the ground, she was surprised. She was actually able to free herself so easily from Nan Gongyu. As He was confused, she started examining her surroundings and became surprised when she discovered that she was now in what appeared to be a valley. Surrounded by tall and sturdy sheer cliffs, the peaks couldn't even be seen due to being blocked by the clouds. Where is this? How could we come to this place? Where are the other people? He glared at Nan Gongyu as she asked him. Nan Gongyu faintly replied, Because of you cheating and being intimate with another man, it made my spiritual power arise and become unstable. It seems to have accidentally triggered a restriction in the secret territory, so we were both sent to this place. I also don't really know where we currently are. Who are you saying cheated? He angrily said. I'm a doctor. My work is to help and treat people. Cheating your head. The chilliness within Nan Gongyu's eyes melted a little as he revealed a hint of delight, but in the blink of an eye it disappeared, changing into a look of confusion and grief. But for him you stabbed me with a sword. In your heart, isn't he more important than me? She raised her eyebrows, her gaze couldn't help but land on Nan Gongyu's body. The always powerful and callous Hell King was at this moment wearing clothes filled with bloodstains. His handsome face was pale without a trace of color, while his arched and elegant thin lips were slightly pursed, displaying his frustration and hesitancy. So she reflexively said, I don't like owing others, and I didn't want to owe him and shopkeeper Zhou a favor. If you had killed him and he died because of me, I would have owed them. Who knew that even though your cultivation base is so high, you unexpectedly couldn't dodge that sword? Having heard that, Nan Gongyu's eyes lit up with a bright light, and the lost look on his face disappeared without a single trace. So, for Sheer, that Gu Lu Feng is just a stranger you don't want to owe a debt to? She sneered as she said, he naturally means less than His Highness Hell King and Ice Lotus Fairy's intimate relationship. Nan Gongyu revealed a helpless look. Sheer, how many times do you want me to say it? He hadn't yet finished speaking when his face suddenly changed, and he reached out his hand to pull He back into his arms. Before He could react, she felt a formidable and fierce energy rise behind her back. Chapter 264, Believe in your man. While carrying He, Nan Gongyu exerted himself to turn around, then he gently pushed her to the side. Almost at the same time as she was in the air, He turned her head to see behind her and noticed that a gigantic rock bird had appeared. The rock's whole body was light brown. When its two enormous wings were spread out, it almost covered the entire valley. Its sharp beak seemed to flash like the cold tip of a bent blade as it faced their direction, threateningly aiming to pierce them. The appearance of this rock was too sudden as it had appeared without any warning at all. It was as if it had torn its way out of an invisible space, so even He's divine senses hadn't detected it. However, Nan Gongyu had managed to sense it. Moreover, his first reaction was to shove He aside. Unfortunately, the rock's powerful and sharp beak severely pierced Nan Gongyu's left shoulder during his protection of her. Blood instantly splattered everywhere, dyeing Nan Gongyu's body with blood, and adding an additional wound on top of his previous one. Nan Gongyu! He screamed in fear and wanted to rush towards him. But the next moment she found out that she couldn't move, because her body was enveloped by a transparent spiritual barrier. She was confined by a void spiritual barrier. The moment Nangongyu had pushed her away, he had wrapped her in a void spiritual barrier to protect and confine her. What does that bastard think he's doing? Just then, Heshi saw Nangongyu stumble back several steps due to the impact, yet a corner of his mouth curled into a sneer. His hands suddenly gripped the rock's beak that was as solid as iron, and with all his strength, he lifted it up using its beak. Then, he ruthlessly smashed it to the ground. The strong smell of blood wafted towards the tip of Heshi's nose. Examining Nangongyu's bloody left shoulder, as well as the wound on the left side of his chest that had yet to stop bleeding, she could no longer bear it and yelled, "Nangongyu, you bastard, quickly release me." Although it was only for a short moment, Heshi had clearly sensed that Nangongyu's spiritual power was weakening. She recalled the warmth that had wrapped around her and protected her when space had ripped apart and twisted with that vortex, as well as Nangongyu's overly pale complexion. He must have expended too much spiritual power in that space distortion to protect her, and coupled with the injury on his chest, his current strength would be about 30% less than normal. However, that rock was a fierce beast with a horrible amount of spiritual power pressure. It was even more powerful than the golden python. How could the current Nangongyu deal with it and escape unscathed? After throwing the rock, Nangongyu's figure swayed slightly and his face paled further. When he heard Heshi's words, he laughed proudly, "Sheer, you have to believe in you, man." Just as his words faded, his right hand unfolded, and in a flash a dark, slender, and long sword appeared in his hand. A black aura curled upwards from the sword's body, and accompanied by the sword's spiritual power, the originally clear blue sky of the secret territory suddenly turned completely dark. Next, following lightning and thunder, a gale erupted. It was a force that slowly built up power in the valley, capable of extinguishing heaven and earth. And at this moment, the rock that had been knocked down stood up. But because of Nangongyu's attack, the feathers covering its entire body were now puffed up, while its brown beak was stained with blood. With its pair of fierce, bloodshot eyes, it appeared particularly frightening. Suddenly, the rock's wings fiercely flapped, creating a violent gale that mixed with sand and pebbles as it attacked Nangongyu. Heshi's heart felt like it was being squeezed by something, and as she spoke, the voice escaping her mouth was hoarse and trembling, "Nangongyu, quickly release me, do you hear me?" Within the gale, Nangongyu's hair was being blown in every direction. His entire body was dyed red with blood and his clothes were disheveled. But nonetheless, he gave off a wild and unruly charm. Chapter 265, Will You Die If You Don't Show Off? A corner of his mouth lifted into a charming smile, and he said with a gentle voice, "Relax, I'll come to you after I finish dealing with this beast. Just obediently wait for me." After saying that, he waved his left hand. Following this, the void spiritual barrier suddenly soared into the air, bringing Heshi to a remote cave at the furthest corner of the valley. This place was far from the battlefield and was protected from the dark thunderclouds and gale. From here you could see the gale sweeping sand, pebbles, and grass into the air, and a space enveloped by a dark aura in the center of it all. The fierce battle was being carried out before her eyes, yet she couldn't see or do anything to help. Suddenly, within the dark aura, there came a violent cacophony of loud sounds. Shortly afterwards, the rock soared high into the sky. It then waved its 100-meter-long wings, which made a sharp whistling sound echo throughout the valley. All the broken rocks in the valley were swept up by the gale, while all the vegetation was pulled up from the ground. Scattering everywhere, some even flew towards Heshi, but fortunately she was completely covered by the void spiritual barrier. Heshi's hands tightly clenched into fists when she saw Nangongyu fly like an arrow into the sky, leaving only a shadow as he faced the rock. As one black and one yellowish-brown shadow collided in the air, it sent a terrible shockwave throughout the valley. It was as if fireworks bloomed magnificently in the sky as brown feathers rained down as far as the eye could see, while a thick smell of blood filled the sky. Imprisoned in the cave, Heshi at this moment sensed that the energy of the void spiritual barrier was gradually weakening, which meant that Nangongyu's spiritual energy was also gradually weakening. She was so anxious it felt like she was being burnt alive as she constantly pounded against the void's spiritual barrier, but all to no avail. Suddenly, a shrill bird cry pierced her ears and a glaringly bright flash of thunder lit up the sky, lighting up a black shadow savagely slicing the rock from its neck, straight to its heart. She stared blankly at the sky, completely oblivious to the void's spiritual barrier disappearing. With a tremendous thud that echoed loudly throughout the valley, the rock's dead body fell from the sky and smashed a huge hole into the ground. Then, Nangongyu slowly descended from the sky still holding his sword and landed beside the rock. She heaved a sigh of relief. Loosening the fists she'd clenched so tightly that she'd hurt her palms, she then quickly ran towards him. Unfortunately, once she was close enough to Nangongyu and could clearly see his appearance, she sucked in a cold breath. Other than his face, Nangongyu's entire body was filled with wounds. And since he was absolutely drenched in blood, it gave off the impression that he had been bathing in it. One of his hands hung powerlessly at his side, displaying evidently that his bone was broken. But even if this was the case, when Nangongyu saw her, a corner of his mouth raised to expose an affectionate smile. "Sheer, did you see that? Just as I said before, I'm your man and I'll definitely be able to protect you." Heshi's heart suddenly slowed with a sour and painful twinge as an incomparable anger and worry rushed forth one after another, causing the choked voice that left her mouth to tremble. "Nangongyu, will you die if you don't show off? Who wants to be protected by you?" Although she was speaking like that, she still immediately took out her silver needles and quickly stood before Nangongyu. Acting like it wasn't worth anything, she continuously poured precious ninth secluded spring water onto his wounds and stuffed his mouth with medicinal pills. For the first time, Heshi's hands were cold and trembling as she held her silver needles. She didn't want to admit it, but she'd been so scared and frightened when the void's spiritual barrier had weakened little by little. Nangongyu grabbed Heshi's small hands that were cold and trembling, softly saying, "Sheer, don't worry, I'm all right." Who was worried? Heshi angrily responded while gnashing her teeth. Nangongyu reached out his hand to gently rub at the redness in corners of her eyes, his voice soft and husky as it reached her ears. I was worried that I have no way to protect you, worried that Sheer will think that I'm not good enough, and worried that you'll like other men." Chapter 266, I'll never let go. His warm breath tickled Heshi's ear and made it burn, so she quickly edged further away. This guy simply didn't care about his life, his injuries were obviously serious. For an ordinary person, getting this badly hurt would be fatal, but he was acting like he wasn't even the one who was injured. The absorption rate of ninth secluded spring water was 100 times more powerful when compared to other normal healing medicines. So using the spring water, Heshi poured some on his wounds, while the rest she made him drink. Color slowly began restoring itself to Nangongyu's pale complexion, while the garish wounds on his body began to rapidly heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. However, Nangongyu's body had many injuries, and most of them were so deep that even his bones could be seen. Even if they healed, sinister scars would still remain. When Heshi examined those scars, her brows couldn't help crease as it reminded her of that extremely disturbing battle scene and the fear in her heart. Nangongyu laughed lightly as he teased her, "Oh, the wounds are extremely ugly, huh? Does Sheer dislike me now?" Heshi clenched her teeth to suppress the hoarseness and choked tone in her voice, fiercely responding, "Yes. So ugly that just looking at them is irksome." Nangongyu raised his eyebrows, shamelessly pressing closer to Heshi as he whispered, "Don't most people say that a man with a scarred body is sexy?" Heshi was treating the bone fracture on his arm, and when she heard that, her movement of pressing her hands on his wound momentarily slowed. "If other people think you're sexy, then you can go and find them." Heshi sneered. Nangongyu released a muffled groan, his face showing a pained expression. Following this, his pained expression turned into one of grief with his long eyelashes slightly hanging down. "Now you know what pain feels like." Heshi's heart couldn't bear it, and the voice that left her mouth was unyielding as she applied excessive pressure to his wound. "In the future, let's see if you dare not treasure your life." As long as He is by my side, no matter how heavy the injury, this king won't be afraid. Nan Gongyu abruptly reached out his uninjured hand to wrap it around her slender waist, pulling her into his embrace. Sheer, you won't leave me, right? No matter where you go, I'll always follow you. I'll absolutely never let you go. Always follow me. Are you a malicious spirit? He glared at him, then she turned to free herself from his arms. She no longer wanted to pay attention to this man's shameless words. Instead, all of her energy was being spent on treating Nan Gongyu's injuries. Whether it was the horrible scars or the broken arm, while all of them were terrible to see, in actuality they weren't that big of a deal. With He's medical skills and the ability of a nascent soul stage martial artist's powerful regeneration and healing, she could guarantee that within a few days Nan Gongyu would be completely recovered. Rather, the most troublesome part was the excessive amount of spiritual power that Nan Gongyu had consumed when he was fighting with the rock. Due to such a depletion of spiritual power, his meridians were burnt in many places, and they would need time to be nursed back to health. After some thought, He took out a decoction used to restore meridians that was made of high-grade spiritual herbs that grew in her space, and water from the 9th secluded spirit spring. However, when she went to pass the decoction to Nan Gongyu, he shook his head without hesitation. Sheer, you can see that I'm currently unable to move freely, so why don't you feed me instead? It was only your right hand that was fractured, your left hand is still okay. How come you can't drink the medicine on your own? Nan Gongyu turned his head to the side, unwilling to look at the black medicinal liquid in He's hands any longer. With a gloomy and sad face, he said, "You personally gave Gu Lufeng, that brat, acupuncture treatment. Your hands even touched his body, yet you refused to feed me. Sheer, in your heart, am I less important than him?" A corner of He's mouth twitched, she refused to say a word. Nan Gongyu's expression filled with resentment and sadness, and suddenly grabbing his black long sword, he used it to support his body as he stood up. Chapter 267, Protect you throughout this lifetime. Unfortunately, with his spiritual power currently depleted and his physical strength completely exhausted, before he could properly get up he staggered and heavily fell to the ground. Nan Gongyu. He rushed to support him, cold sweat appearing on her spine due to fright. Are you unwilling to live anymore? Nan Gongyu's jet black eyes were scorching hot as they stared fixedly at her. Just half an hour ago he still had the appearance of a monster that could extinguish the world, but now he looked like a pitiful dog with his watery eyes. He felt defeated by him and ultimately, she picked up the bowl on the side, then unhappily said, "Okay, I'll feed you." Lord Hell King. A corner of his mouth slightly raised. Regardless of He's opposition, half of his upper body leaned against her as he happily accepted He feeding him the medicine. Occasionally he would touch He's soft and delicate cheek, his expression one of satisfied contentment. But after barely being fed 2 spoonfuls, his hand touched He's wound on her left shoulder and realized that it felt cold. Instantly his eyes darkened and the glint of a cold light flashed within them. He was just about to feed him the 3rd spoonful of medicine when she abruptly felt a warmth on her shoulder. Then, a burst of spiritual power covered the wound on her left shoulder. For a split second, her cold body and frozen to the point of numb left shoulder instantly restored to their original condition. He's eyes widened. Nan Gongyu, this guy. Obviously, his spiritual power was depleted, and with great difficulty, he was finally able to restore some, but now he'd used it to treat her minor injury. Is there something wrong with this guy's brain? While He had still been inside the secret territory's Zijin Palace, she'd naturally sustained an extremely heavy injury, but it was mainly the depletion of her spiritual power and she hadn't had enough time to recover it yet. After drinking some of her spiritual spring water she'd felt much better. And as for the injury on her shoulder, she'd intended to transfer her spiritual energy around the wound to expel the cold air and help it to naturally heal. Compared to the current condition of Nan Gongyu's injury, He's small injury was simply nothing. Yet just as He was about to say something, she heard Nan Gongyu's dark voice vowing in her ears, "Sheer, believe in me, I'll protect you throughout this lifetime. Heshi's body slightly startled and her heart felt as if it was being scratched by something. It was itchy, yet gentle. However, very quickly, she remembered the scene that she'd seen not too long ago. Nan Gongyu had turned around to examine the extent of Feng Lianying's injury, leaving Heshi behind. Furthermore, for Feng Lianying, he'd pierced Gu Lufeng with a sword. The fire in her heart instantly extinguished as if cold water was poured on it, like the frigid winter wind blowing into a warm room. Heshi's complexion hardened and became cold as she indifferently said, Nan Gongyu, since it's an impossible thing to do, why even promise in the first place? You only dare to say it while we're in the secret territory, but if I really killed Feng Lianying, would you honestly let me off? Nan Gongyu blankly stared at Heshi, watching as a corner of her mouth lifted into a cold smile as she said, You said that you'll protect me throughout this lifetime, so if I tell you that the injury on my body was caused by Feng Lianying, what would you do? Would you kill your beloved little sister Lianying? Nan Gongyu's body stiffened slightly and he lowered his eyes to hide the surging emotions within them. Sensing the icy atmosphere and alienation being projected from Heshi's body, he really wanted to say something. Unfortunately, due to circumstances, he had to swallow back the words that were already on the tip of his tongue. Nan Gongyu stayed silent, as she'd expected. Seeing this, although Heshi had long ago prepared her heart, an unspeakable disappointment and rage still surged within her heart. She sneered and said, Gu Lufeng and I merely injured her a little and yet you couldn't wait to choke me. If I'd really killed her, weren't you going to want my life in revenge? Nan Gongyu, even though things are like this, you still dared to say that you'll protect me throughout this lifetime? Don't make me laugh. Chapter 268, I would rather not. After Heshi's words left her mouth, Nan Gongyu suddenly reached out his hand to pull her into his embrace. In his eyes, there was a burning red light that hinted at countless suppressed emotions and patience, like a dam threatening to burst at any time. Sheer, do you really think that I would ever harm you? Even if I had to choke myself, I still wouldn't be willing to hurt even a strand of your hair. I said that I wouldn't allow anyone to hurt you, and that includes myself. Heshi wanted to fiercely knock Nan Gongyu's hands away, however, while his health was obviously poorly, the strength he used to confine her was unbreakable. Even the wound on his arm that had already been bandaged began to unravel due to the strain he was exerting. Heshi stopped struggling and grinding her teeth, she said, You said that you won't allow anyone to hurt me. But you used your hands against Gu Lufeng. Nan Gongyu, you have to know, that if it wasn't for him saving me, I would have died long ago by Feng Lianying's hands. I was foolish. How could I have ever believed that your spotless, pure, and kind-hearted little sister Lianying would be so malicious as to attempt to kill me? The sharp redness in Nan Gongyu's eyes flashed, while his face showed the mixed expressions of coldness and distress. Sheer, I believe every word you've said. You believe me and yet you still want to kill Gu Lufeng? Isn't the reason you want to kill Gu Lufeng due to him injuring your little sister Lianying? If it was switched to me being the one who wanted to kill Feng Lianying, wouldn't you even want to kill me? Sheer, do you have to be so dense? Nan Gongyu asked as he stared at her with a grief-filled expression. Heshi was confused. What did that mean? I wanted to kill Gu Lufeng, not because of Feng Lianying, but because you were too close to him and ignored me. You healed him, yet you didn't even look at me, and in order to save him, you opposed me without hesitation. Heshi raised her head to look at Nan Gongyu, only to see that his head was turned to the side with an uncomfortable expression on his face. There was even an obvious blush coloring his ear. So it wasn't because Gu Lufeng had injured Feng Lianying, rather, it was because she and Gu Lufeng had been too close that Nan Gongyu wanted to kill him? What did that mean? Don't tell me that the supremely dignified Hell King would unexpectedly admit such jealousy. Under Heshi's unfathomable gaze, Nan Gongyu was somewhat embarrassed. Suddenly, his hands reached out to pull her into his embrace, then he fiercely said, Sheer, you're mine. No one except me can touch you. If I run into such a situation again in the future, even if you're angry, I will still do it again. I'll never let off any man who dares attempt to make a move on you. Once he finished speaking, he bowed his head and using a slight amount of pressure, he bit down on her pink, tender lip, leaving red teeth marks. He cried out in pain and pushing him away, she angrily asked, "Nan Gongyu, are you a dog?" Although Nan Gongyu's words were pleasing to hear, whenever she recalled the scene of Nan Gongyu abandoning her to take care of Feng Lianing, she felt extremely uncomfortable. In Heshi's heart, a deep scar still remained. Without a doubt, in Nan Gongyu's heart, no matter how interested he was in her, there would still always be a place for Feng Lianing too. Regardless of whether it was out an emotional bond, a sense of responsibility, or some other secret concern, the fact remained that Feng Lianing was special to Nan Gongyu. And she, Heshi, was bound to monopolize whichever man she fancied. No one was allowed to covet him, and no one could snatch him away. If he had another person in his heart, then she'd rather not want him. Heshi lowered her eyes and indifferently said, "Don't you think you care too much? Your closeness with your little sister Lianing, I'm not asking anything about it, am I? So why do you get to have a say in who I touch?" Nan Gongyu's expression sank as if he wanted to get angry. Yet when he saw Heshi's stubborn little face, he then sighed and said with a trace of resentment in his voice, "But Sheer, isn't this your responsibility?" Chapter 269, Risking One's Life for Adventure. Heshi was stunned. "What does it have to do with me?" Nan Gongyu pulled her closer and laughed, "It's exactly like how I help you to get rid of the flies around you, you're also responsible for driving away the women around me." Heshi's expression blanked out for a while as she watched Nan Gongyu's handsome face slowly edging closer to her. Such a world-toppling face was now enlarged before her eyes with a tender and loving smile gracing his lips. It was just like a scorching sun dazzling people's eyes. "Sheer, you should know that all the women throughout the Jinling Kingdom want to marry this king and are lined up from Yanjing City, all the way to Yuyang City. This king won't disturb them, but since you're my princess, it's naturally your duty to drive those women away. Don't you agree?" Heshi felt his hot breath fanning her neck, while his bright eyes burned as they stared at her, seeming to swallow her whole. Her mind was in chaos as she abruptly struggled to get away from Nan Gongyu, and with a taut expression, she said, "You, stop imagining that your love is reciprocated with an uninterested person. Who would want to help you drive away those women? As long as you don't provoke me, it wouldn't be any of my business even if you were flooded by flies." Nan Gongyu still wanted to say something, but he was fiercely pushed to the ground by Heshi's palms filled with spiritual power. Picking up the bowl of medicine on the ground, she fiercely said, "So, do you want to drink this medicine or not? If not, then should I throw this medicine away?" Nan Gongyu noticed that although her expression was fierce, the depressed emotion filling her eyes had started to decrease. Unable to help it, he heaved a sigh of relief, then quickly took the medicine from Heshi's hand and obediently drank it. After drinking the medicine, Nan Gongyu inspected their surroundings and saw that there was no longer a visible crack in the space they were currently in. Unfortunately, a trace of concern still remained within his heart. "Sheer, this place must be a rift in the secret territory. Because it's existed for many years and gone through multiple spiritual energy surges, it's connected itself to a separate section of the secret territory." Nan Gongyu easily used the black sword in his hand to draw a line, tracing out a space of around 100 square meters. That rock was a 6th-rank spiritual beast, and a 6th-rank spiritual beast is already considered to be amongst one of the more powerful spiritual beasts. If the rock left its smell in an area, even if other spiritual beasts were to enter, they wouldn't easily dare approach. "Sheer, during the time I move my spiritual energy in meditation, you can't leave this area." Although there were still a lot of things Nan Gongyu wanted to say, he held them in. In the sealed dragon domain there were countless hidden sections full of unknown dangers, all similar to high-level spiritual beasts like the rock. For a martial artist, entering one of the sealed dragon domain's hidden sections was really like risking one's life for adventure. Even though Nan Gongyu was arrogant, he wasn't conceited. While he had the ability to defend himself, he didn't dare promise that he would be able to enter and escape with Heshi in one piece. This was the reason why he hadn't let Heshi know about the sealed dragon domain. At this very moment, in Nangong Yu's storage ring, countless treasures and medicinal pills were stored. All of them were capable of causing fights between Foundation Establishment stage, Meridian stage, and even Gold Core stage martial artists. These were things that he had specially scoured every corner of the secret territory for, in order to give them to Heshi after he had left. His, Nangong Yu's woman, was someone he wanted to protect properly, but he also wanted to give her the best presents to make her happy. If Heshi was willing, he would gladly accompany her to other secret territories suitable for Foundation Establishment stage and Meridian stage martial artists to help her advance in the future. However, it was currently suicidal for her to enter such a dangerous place as the sealed dragon domain. But it was now too late for those words, so Nangong Yu kept his mouth shut. Since Heshi was already here, no matter what, he would thoroughly protect her at all costs. Chapter 270, Yu, hop up. Taking advantage of Nangong Yu's meditation to digest the ninth secluded spring water and the spiritual energy from the medicine, Heshi began to examine the rock's dead body. Unlike the golden python's broken bones, the rock's flesh was still intact, so the whole body could be collected. The rock's body was too broken by Nangong Yu's strikes, while the sharp beak and claws that could have been used to make weapons were almost completely damaged by Nangong Yu's sword. Knowing that only 30 to 40% of Nangong Yu's strength remained, but that he was still able to beat a 6th-rank spiritual beast to such a miserable pulp, Heshi's heart couldn't help but quiver. In the end, just how strong was this guy's real strength? After Nangong Yu finished absorbing the medicine's energy, he temporarily froze his internal energy to give his body time to recuperate, because although the rock's smell was currently lingering in the area, there was also the strong stench of blood. This, coupled with the unstable cracks in their present space, meant that it wouldn't be safe to stay in this place for a long period of time. Just as he finished converging his spiritual energy and raised his head, he saw Heshi with her sleeves rolled up and readying herself to sort out the rock's dead body. He couldn't help smiling as he said, "Although a lot of spiritual power is contained within the rock's flesh, an unpleasant smell of urine lingers on it which is hard to remove and causes it to be hard to swallow. Sheer, if you're interested in the rock's corpse, just take its inner core, the rest isn't useful." Ignoring him, Heshi used a sharp dagger to cut down the rock's flesh, following along its veins. Without raising her head, she then answered, "Oh, it doesn't taste good? Then you won't get to eat any." After saying that, she threw the last piece of meat smeared with blood into her space. Then, lifting her head, the perspiration trickled down her hair onto her smooth white forehead. Her phoenix-like eyes were glistening brightly just like stars as they stared up at him. Nangong Yu was fascinated by her lofty face and he couldn't help but laugh involuntarily. "Okay, I was wrong. I forgot that the most unpalatable of foods can be made into the most wonderful of treats in my shear's hands. My shear is amazing." Heshi snorted coldly, "Nonsense. Are you done absorbing the medicine's energy? Where are we going next?" Nangong Yu pointed his finger at the top of the cliff. "Anyway, let's leave this valley first, we'll discuss this again later." After saying that, he used the black sword in his hand as a prop and slowly went to stand up. But before he could stand up straight, he staggered and almost fell back to the ground. Heshi immediately gripped his wrist and carefully started examining the vein located there. The more she checked, the more pronounced the crease between her brows became. While Nangong Yu's body had now been replenished with a lot of spiritual energy, this spiritual energy, however, had gathered in his dantian and wasn't able to spread to his meridians. Because the injury in his meridians was somewhat serious, it needs some time to self-heal. Moreover, his stamina had been almost completely used up, so it wouldn't recover within such a short amount of time. Heshi frowned as she looked at the high cliff, vaguely making out the tip of it through the layer of clouds. With Nangong Yu's current body it would be too difficult for him to climb up, yet it would also be too dangerous if they didn't leave as they were near an unstable crack in space. "You, hop up," Heshi said as she suddenly stood in front of Nangong Yu, her back facing him. Nangong Yu was stunned to the point of standing still, and for a long while he didn't make a sound until Heshi once again urged him to hop up. Then, coughing lightly, he said, actually, I can go up by myself. He turned to glare at him. If you want to add another wound to your previous one, go ahead and climb up by yourself, but if a 6th rank spiritual beast appears again I'll have to fight it alone. Nan Gongyu's expression was somewhat uncomfortable and his jade-like white complexion was slightly flushed as He glared at him. So, he then grudgingly said, this king's legendary reputation is going to be ruined by sheer hands. Chapter 271, Purple Abyss Vine. After saying that, he leaned his body forward onto He's back and without hesitation, his hands encircled her slender waist. He only felt something warm envelope her and was completely unaware of the weight she was now supporting. Instead, all her senses were concentrated to his lips as they slowly exhaled beside her ear. I entrust this king's lifelong happiness to Sheer's hands. Sheer, you have to take responsibility. Responsibility, your sister. She grabbed Nan Gongyu's hands and gathering all her spiritual power, she then soared into the sky towards the top of the valley. The whistling wind passing their ears brought with it a gust of cold air, yet the man on her back was keeping her extremely warm. For a moment, He's mind wandered. It seemed like it was only an hour ago when they were on opposing sides and on the brink of severing their relationship. But now, it had become a situation of dependency regarding life or death. Fate really loved to tease people. What sort of future would there be between Nan Gongyu and herself? The cliff of the valley was really high, so even though He's spiritual power was almost depleted they still weren't able to see the peak. Fortunately, not too far away there was a cave in the cliff wall, allowing her to temporarily catch her breath and replenish her spiritual power. Landing steadily in front of the cave, He was able to examine it up close and realized that while it looked shallow at first glance, it actually led deeper into the cliff wall. It only appeared shallow because it was covered by a thick layer of wisteria. However, this wisteria was quite strange as its branches were transparent and with a closer look, you could see a liquid flowing inside of it. He couldn't help herself and took 2 steps closer to take a look at it. Suddenly, Nan Gongyu's voice sounded in her ears, careful, this is a 5th rank spiritual plant, Purple Abyss Vine. Unfortunately, Nan Gongyu's warning came just a breath too late. He's finger had barely brushed against the plant when she felt a strong wind attack aiming towards her face. The harmless-looking purple vines of a moment ago had moved together like a whip and thrashed themselves towards He's body. He was shocked and quickly retreated several steps, but the speed of the purple vines was faster. Furthermore, every vine heading towards her seemed to have the striking strength of a meridian stage martial artist. Yet, just as He was about to be hit, the sound of lightning abruptly crackled and echoed by her ears. The purple vines were struck by this wave of lightning and stopped, seeming to be hurt as they trembled along the ground. Several of the vines were completely burnt by the lightning and quickly shrunk back towards the cave entrance. Nan Gongyu quickly pulled He behind his back, and holding up the black sword in his hand, he prepared to attack the purple vines. But He suddenly gripped Nan Gongyu's hand and said with exasperation, Nan Gongyu, are you crazy? Even now you're still daring to use spiritual power. Are you looking for death? Nan Gongyu froze, and before he had time to recover, he'd already been dragged behind He's back. Next, a powerful earth attribute barrier appeared to protect him and keep him firmly behind her. Just obediently wait in there for me. If you dare move, then don't blame me for being rude. Seeing the girl's slim back blocking him from harm, Nan Gongyu became momentarily stunned. For the first time, there was someone who treated him like a treasure and willingly stood in front of him to protect him. This feeling was very strange, yet also, tremendously wonderful, causing his entire heart to feel sweet and sour as if it was soaked in honey. Why was his Sheer always so special? Currently, though, He was focusing on the danger before them, how would she know that behind her Nan Gongyu's head was lost in thought? Seeing the purple vine's second attack heading their way, He's heart lurched and she abruptly gathered her spiritual power. In the blink of an eye, a golden flame condensed into a spectacularly patterned ball on her fingertips before she quickly smashed it towards the purple abyss vine. Chapter 272, Spiritual Demon Plant. Plants were afraid of fire, so sure enough, as soon as the fireball touched the purple abyss vine it instantly started burning. However, unexpectedly, even though the purple abyss vine was bathed in the fire, it didn't seem frightened like it had when it was being struck by the lightning. Instead, it seemed to tremendously enjoy the fire. All of its purple vines swayed gently in the flames, and at the same time, the spiritual power contained within the fire seemed to be diminishing. These purple vines were actually devouring the spiritual fire. A moment later, all of the golden flames were completely extinguished. Heshi's expression became grave as she prepared to withstand the purple abyss vine's next wave of attack. However, the purple abyss vine once again responded beyond her expectations. They indeed moved towards Heshi, but it had no intention of attacking her. Rather, it entangled itself around Heshi's feet and body with an action similar to fawning and acting coquettishly. Raising its sturdiest vine in front of her, it then swayed it to and fro. This pose made it seem like it was asking for something. For a moment Heshi was dumbstruck. Could it be that this purple vine was an M? Did it enjoy being attacked and wanted more? During this time, Nangongyu standing behind her stepped forward and taking out a porcelain bottle filled with ninth secluded spring water, he poured 2 drops onto the purple vine swaying in front of Heshi. In the next instant, the scene unfolding before Heshi caused her further shock. The leaves of the purple abyss vine suddenly started emitting the hint of a violet light, and during this, they all stood straight up and swayed in sync. Heshi could have sworn that if there was music, the purple vines would have been dancing around in a lively manner. After moving about for a while in a synchronized dance, the violet light faded without a trace and the sturdier vines once again eagerly wrapped themselves around Heshi, this time including Nangongyu in its fawning. Then, almost as if it was impatiently begging, it rubbed its leaves together to make a rustling sound. Heshi still hadn't completely come to terms with what had just happened when she heard Nangongyu slowly speaking as he narrowed his eyes. "You want this?" As he shook the porcelain bottle in front of the purple vines, it immediately started swaying in exuberance. If it hadn't been afraid that Nangongyu would attack it with lightning like before, it would have already snatched the bottle away. Heshi, however, was stunned. "It can understand what we're saying." Nangongyu answered, "There aren't that many 5th-rank spiritual plants capable of using divine sense, but the purple abyss vine is one of them and is therefore known as a spiritual demon plant. Spiritual demon plants can generally communicate with people like spirit pets." After saying that, Nangongyu looked at Heshi with affection in his eyes. "Sheer, you have a muddled dantian and possess the spiritual power of all 5 elements, so advancing the spiritual root of your wood attribute is immensely important for you. Although the rank of this purple abyss vine isn't particularly high, it's still useful. Moreover, it's possible for it to advance in the future, so you should take it as your spirit pet." Hearing that, Heshi's heart was moved. You could say that possessing the spiritual power of all 5 elements would make Heshi exceptionally powerful, but at the same time, the road of ascension was also tremendously more difficult when compared to other martial artists. Since she was still a low-level martial artist, it wasn't too bad though, as she could only accumulate a certain amount of spiritual power. But if she wanted to advance to gold core stage in the future, she would inevitably need to make a breakthrough on the spiritual power of all 5 elements. This would help to balance her spiritual power and raise her chances of succeeding. It wasn't too difficult for her to advance the dual attributes of fire and water, but for several other elements, she had yet to find a method to help advance them. So in regards to this, it would definitely be useful for her to take a wood attribute spirit pet. But while many people took in all sorts of spirit pets, most of them were beast pets. How many of them were able to subdue plant spirit pets? Would the purple abyss vine really want to be her spirit pet? Chapter 273, Subdue. Thinking of it, Heshi frowned until she suddenly felt Nangongyu lightly scrape the tip of her nose, his voice filled with a teasing tone as he smiled. "Little fool, of course, it's not easy for other people to subdue spiritual demon plants, but you have something they like the most, spiritual spring water. Don't tell me you still don't know how to bargain with them." When she heard that, Heshi was unable to refute Nan Gongyu and quickly spread out her left hand. In an instant, spiritual spring water started to slowly condense in her delicate white palm. Sure enough, once the purple abyss vine sensed the rich and fragrant spiritual energy, it immediately climbed up and wrapped itself around Heshi's arm like a child wanting to grab spiritual food. While the purple abyss vine was greedily absorbing the spiritual energy, Nan Gongyu took advantage of the situation to immediately grab Heshi's right hand and gently bite one of her fingers. The scarlet blood then seeped out to slowly drip onto the purple abyss vine. In a split second, an intense violet light constantly pulsed around the vines, causing them to stand up straight and make a rustling sound. It was almost like it was angry and tried to resist by desperately struggling. Heshi's eyes frosted over and she coldly said, "You wanted spiritual spring water, so naturally you have to pay the price. I, Heshi, hereby promise that as long as you become my spirit pet, in the future I'll allow you to drink as much ninth secluded spirit spring water as you want." After she finished speaking, the purple abyss vine suddenly stopped shaking and struggling. Yet the leaves still continued to move and make a rustling sound like it was in an intense discussion. Eventually, all of the purple abyss vine stopped swaying and it moved in front of Heshi. Her blood, including the spiritual spring water on her palm, slowly disappeared into the purple abyss vine's body. The next moment, a violet light gleamed on her palm. The mark of a purple vine then flashed before it slowly disappeared from view. Heshi used her divine sense to internally inspect her body and found that the purple abyss vine really was residing within her. Focusing her mind and stretching out her right hand, she watched as a purple vine was instantly released and hit a huge rock on one side of the cave. In the blink of an eye, the huge rock was crushed into dust. This process was extremely fast and the sound was very faint, so if you weren't watching carefully, it would have been easy to miss it. All it took was the flash of a purple light, and it looked like the huge rock was shattered due to the weather. Heshi was satisfied as she returned the purple abyss vine into her body. She found that the purple abyss vine could freely lengthen and shorten according to her thoughts, and moreover, its speed was extremely fast. It was definitely more effective to use than her previous bone whip. But while Heshi was satisfied, the purple abyss vine within her body was very unhappy and continuously protested. Although spiritual demon plants usually couldn't speak, the owner of the contract could generally understand what they meant anyway. As a result, Heshi felt like there was a voice in her head constantly scolding her for not keeping her word and being untrustworthy. Heshi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Focusing once more, she moved the purple abyss vine into her space, leaving only a short length of vine within her body as a weapon. However, when the purple abyss vine was moved into her space, Heshi discovered a strange thing. She could actually see the state of her space even though she wasn't currently in it. She could even see Dandan and little golden dragon lying on the edge of the spirit spring, Dandan's broken voice ringing in her ears. Although the little golden dragon was still in a coma, she could tell that the two little guys' bodies were recovering, which made her heavy heart feel relieved. Chapter 274, The Perfect Wife. Without the purple abyss vine obstructing her sight, Heshi could now clearly see the cave on the cliff. It was a cave made entirely out of rock, and except for the purple abyss vine, there weren't any traces of other plants or small reptiles around. The cave entrance wasn't large and only allowed for 2 people to enter at the same time, but when inside, they found that the inside was exceptionally wide. They were unsure if it was because there weren't any snakes, rats, ants, or any sort of plant, but the atmosphere inside the cave was fresh and dry. Heshi had originally intended to bring Nan Gongyu to the top of the cliff, but now it seemed that this cave that had been guarded by the purple abyss vine was more secure than an unknown cliff. It also seemed more suitable for healing. Nan Gongyu brought out a huge night pearl to light up the entire cave, while Heshi removed all the items of furniture she had stored in her space. Big items such as a large bed, table, and chairs, and small items such as food, tableware, and chopsticks. Everything that a person could think of was brought out one by one. This was also the difference between Heshi and other martial artists. An ordinary martial artist's storage space ring wasn't so large, and with only a small space, they were barely able to store treasures and medicinal pills, so why would they be willing to store such insignificant things like these? But Heshi's space was extremely large. So even though she was removing things like the table and chairs that she had placed in a corner of the Spirit Firmament Palace, it still wasn't anywhere near full. All her things in the Spirit Firmament Palace were organized by category, so she wasn't worried at all that storing junk like this would take up the room she could use for treasure items. Since she could enjoy the pleasure of having such plentiful resources, Heshi had never treated her people unfairly, and she was naturally willing to make her adventurous life more comfortable. Heshi supported Nan Gongyu and helped him to lie on the large soft bed, but instead of cultivating right away, he chose to smile as he watched Heshi busily moving back and forth. And as he was watching, his expression slowly became more and more gentle. When Heshi turned around, she caught sight of Nan Gongyu smiling joyfully as he looked at her. With his handsome face shining under the light of the night pearl, it made him seem like a seductive demon and caused her heart to palpitate like crazy. Looking displeased, she glared at him and asked, "What are you laughing about? Didn't you say that you wanted to recover from your injury as soon as possible? Why haven't you started cultivating yet?" Nan Gongyu slowly sat up and faintly laughed, "Because I was reluctant to remove my eyes from you." Currently, Sheer seems like a hard-working little wife busy looking after her husband. Well, to have such a perfect wife, this king is really blessed with the fortune of 3 lifetimes. Dream on. Heshi grabbed one of the pillows on the bed and smacked him over the head with it. "Who's your wife?" Being heavily hit by the pillow, Nan Gongyu uttered a muffled groan and bowed his head in pain. It wasn't a soft cotton pillow, but rather a weighty buckwheat pillow. So although not completely convinced that the great Hell King would be hurt by a buckwheat pillow, Heshi still couldn't help but worriedly move a few steps closer to him. "Hey, are you okay?" But before she had even finished asking, Heshi suddenly felt a strong force grab her, and for a moment, she felt herself spinning in the air. Once she recovered her sense of balance, she realized that she had been dragged onto the bed by Nan Gongyu and was now firmly pinned beneath him. Nan Gongyu gazed down at her while the two of them were so close together, and within Nan Gongyu's pitch-black eyes, it seemed like there was a brightly burning flame. Being watched like that caused Heshi to be flustered, and she moved her hands and feet to struggle free. However, purely comparing their strengths, she was nowhere near Nan Gongyu's match. She wanted to use spiritual power to free herself, but she was worried about his injuries, so she didn't dare act rashly. Unfortunately, this left her trapped in an impossible situation. Using her hands, she forcefully pushed at Nan Gongyu's chest and angrily shouted, "What are you doing? Quickly let me go, otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." Nan Gongyu bowed his head, and his black, silk-like long hair caressed the side of Heshi's face. With the ends of his hair sweeping across the side of her face, she felt a startlingly numb feeling spread throughout her body. Chapter 275, Will Never Let Her Off. Heshi felt her heart beating wildly in her chest and became anxious to get out of Nan Gongyu's arms, but then she heard his dark and husky voice slowly saying, "Never, I'll never let you go. Sheer, just accept your fate. In this life, you're mine." Nan Gongyu then lowered his head and slowly inched towards the soft pink cherry lips he always thought about. It was such a sweet taste, an ecstasy he felt down to his bones, and one that he had missed for many days. However, the second before his lips landed, Heshi slightly turned her small face to the side and made his warm kiss land on a corner of her mouth. Although he had made contact with her exquisite skin and could smell her sweet fragrance, which was extremely alluring, the originally hot atmosphere in the cave was slowly becoming colder. Nan Gongyu could feel Heshi's resistance and disaffection towards him. When Heshi turned her head back, her gaze was frozen as she decisively stared at him and slowly opened her mouth to say, "Nan Gongyu, no matter how pleasant it is to hear your confession, there are still some things I have to tell you first. Feng Lianing, I will definitely kill her. I don't care who she is or how powerful her backers are, I absolutely refuse to let her off. One day I'll make her pay me back what she owes me 100 times." Heshi's voice was ice-cold and filled with a resolute tone. With the trace of murderous intent mixed in, it made those who had previously heard it become colder than they were before. She admitted that her current skill was inferior and that she was still unable to kill Feng Lianing, with no possible way to confront the Luli sect. But just because she wasn't currently capable of it, that didn't mean that it wouldn't be possible in the future. She, Heshi, had always paid a debt of gratitude with kindness, and revenge with hatred. She wouldn't let anyone off who dared provoke her people. Even if she had to oppose Nan Gongyu, she still wouldn't hesitate to even the score. One day, she would establish her own power, so that the people in this world won't dare to easily humiliate her again. For all of this, she could only depend on herself and not rely on other people. Nan Gongyu stared in a daze at Heshi's burning and shining eyes that were like an unfathomable clear pond. They resembled an unpredictable ocean, so arrogant, so conceited, but also so completely breathtaking. This was his sheer. A complicated look flashed across Nan Gongyu's face, and within his deep eyes, an intense emotion was surging. After a brief internal battle, he ultimately bit his tongue to withhold the words wanting to free themselves from his mouth. Heshi wasn't surprised that Nan Gongyu didn't answer her, and without waiting for him to come up with excuses, she firmly pushed him off her to get up and indifferently said, "You stay in here to heal properly, I'll go guard outside." In any case, Nan Gongyu had sustained an injury when he'd saved her, so she would always remember this favor. Just as Heshi went to quickly leave the cave, Nan Gongyu's soft voice came from behind her filled with affection and sadness. "Sheer, Sheer," he gently called her name twice, and then that hoarse and magnetic voice disappeared into faint sighs. He obviously didn't say anything, but Heshi felt like there was the trace of a wound on her heart. Her steps slightly faltered, and then, no longer wanting to stay, she left the cave. Heshi walked out of the cave and took a deep breath, finding that it was only then that her anxiousness could calm down. Releasing the purple abyss vine, she restored it to its original form to cover the cave entrance once again. When the purple abyss vine saw Heshi, it immediately started to sway vigorously. It seemed extremely joyous but also very excited. Whether it was just an illusion, Heshi felt that even though the purple abyss vine was only in her space for a short period of time, it seemed a lot sturdier and solid. The leaves were also plumper, while its originally transparent purple stems and leaves seemed darker too. Chapter 276, The One Who Causes Distress. Heshi watched it sway in obvious excitement, even though its thick vines were still motionless. However, she noticed that it looked as if it was eating and digesting food. A corner of Heshi's mouth twitched, and pushing aside the purple abyss vine's branch that was stretching over to fawn before her, she gave it a few orders and then entered her space. She made sure to attach a part of her divine sense to the purple abyss vine though, that way she would be able to keep a close eye on her surroundings. As soon as she entered her space, she heard the sad sobbing of Dandan. Sensing a new presence in the space, Dandan suddenly whipped his head around like a bird startled by the snapping of a twig. When he saw that it was just Heshi, he immediately leapt into her arms. "Mother, what? I thought that I'd never see you again, Mother." Dandan's cries were extremely heart-wrenching, as if he wanted to vent out all of the fear and worry that he'd been carrying these past few hours. Currently, Dandan's body had reverted back to his original appearance, but his previous round, smooth, and tender body had now become flat. His body color now also appeared a little transparent, displaying the look of one in poor health and undernourished. Heshi pinched his small round face with a sad expression on her face and reproachfully said, "In the future, you're not allowed to take your own safety as a joke, do you hear me? Even if it's to save me, you can't do it." When Dandan was still incubating, he had practically needed to absorb a city's worth of spiritual energy before he was able to break out of his shell. In fact, while his body contained an extreme amount of formidable power, that same amount of power represented his life source. If the power was ever halved and weakened, he would return to the shape of an egg and possibly even lose his life. Acting like a spoiled child, Dandan continuously rubbed his head against Heshi's chest. Seeing him ignoring her words, Heshi couldn't help but say, "Dandan, even if I die, as long as this shumi space still exists you can survive and you won't have to return to being an egg. Once the space has a new owner, you can still live happily. You've been lonely living an egg for so many years, so do you want to become an egg again? In the future you should be obedient and avoid taking unnecessary risks, do you understand? I don't want that. Dandan tightly clutched at Heshi's hair while his small mouth flattened into a thin line, his expression revealing his urge to cry. I don't want Mother to die, I don't want a new owner. If I saw Mother die, then Dandan would rather never come out and forever be an egg. What, Mother, don't abandon Dandan. Heshi sighed, and for a moment her heart was full of a bitter yet soft feeling. This little guy, how could it so easily make people distressed to the point that even she, with a heart of stone, couldn't help but be soft-hearted and moved. Heshi kissed his small cheek and softly said, "All right, I promise you Dandan that I won't die and abandon you. Dandan is a good child, so don't cry anymore, okay?" Dandan's mind was only matured to that of a 4 or 5-year-old child, so when he heard that he immediately felt happy. Clasping his cheeks that were kissed by Heshi he continuously giggled, his little face filled with happiness and joy. However, when his gaze landed on the body of the still unconscious little golden dragon on the edge of the spirit spring, he immediately reverted back into a crying bun. "Mother, why hasn't Long Long woken up yet? Is Long Long going to die? Mother, you're so powerful, so save him, okay?" Carrying Dandan, Heshi made her way towards the edge of the spirit spring and seeing the little golden dragon's body covered in cuts and bruises, her heart found it difficult to bear. She had only just formed a contract with this spirit pet so she didn't yet have any sentimental feelings for it, and so far their interactions had been ones of looking down upon one another. However, she never would have thought that it would go to such an extent to save her. Chapter 277, Burning Heaven Realm. Divine Dragon Fruit. Just a quick look at little golden dragon's body and she could tell that he had a large burn spot, as well as a multitude of sword injuries. His originally golden yellow scales were now broken and bent out of place, while his horns were broken off at the base. With his body and flesh being so burnt in some parts, although the wounds had already stopped bleeding due to the effect of the spring water, it still looks miserable and hideous. Heshi stepped forward to examine the little golden dragon's condition and discovered that even though the water from the ninth secluded spirit spring had strong healing properties for people, it seemed that its effects on the little golden dragon weren't all that effective. Moreover, she was an expert in treating people, so she was completely unfamiliar in regards to the dragon's body structure. Also, even if she wanted to use her silver needles on his acupuncture points to see if it helped heal him, it would be impossible. The little golden dragon's breathing was currently very weak, while his initially arrogant and haughty eyes were now tightly closed. Heshi peeled one of his eyelids back to take a look and found that the pupil seemed slightly dilated. In any case, this wasn't a good sign. Her brows creased tightly and Dandan, who stood on the side, pulled at a corner of her clothes with an expression of hope and expectation as he looked at her. Heshi quickly took out a bunch of medicine bottles. Then, she boiled together a medicinal liquid made of the medicinal pills mixed with ninth secluded spirit spring water and soaked the entirety of the little golden dragon's body in it. Due to the medicine's powerful effect, the wounds that were still seeping out blood began to completely heal, while his dark scales started to return to their previous luster. But at best, such treatment could only cure the little golden dragon's surface injuries. For his internal injuries, Heshi was helpless. The plan, for now, was to at least leave this secret territory earlier and then find a treatment method. Perhaps that old glutton who claimed he was Taoist spiritual master Xian Qing would have a few methods to help her. Heshi was immersed in her worries when suddenly, the little golden dragon's faint voice was heard, go to the Burning Heaven Realm, find the Divine Dragon Fruit. Burning Heaven Realm? Divine Dragon Fruit? Heshi startled when she heard this. She didn't know where the Burning Heaven Realm was, but she did know about the Divine Dragon Fruit as she had read about it before in the All Living Things record. It was a kind of spirit clan demon elixir. A martial artist's spiritual base could quickly promote after taking it, especially during the promotion period, and it could even help raise the power of their level advancement. After a demonic beast takes it, it was possible for it to enhance its abilities and restore its core. It was also said that no matter how severe the internal injury was, it could completely recover. But, according to the things written down in the All Living Things record that Heshi had seen, the divine dragon fruit was only found in the spiritual plantations of Xian Luo continent. It had never before been seen in Mi Luo continent. Going along with what the little golden dragon had said though, could she find the divine dragon fruit in Burning Heaven Realm? Little dragon, do you know where Burning Heaven Realm is? However, in response to Heshi, the little golden dragon could only breathe weakly as it had exhausted all its strength answering her a moment ago. Heshi let out a sigh and then proceeded to mix together a tub of medicinal liquid once again. Completely soaking the little golden dragon in it, she left only its little head floating above the surface. Although this concoction couldn't completely cure the little golden dragon's internal injuries, it could at least ensure that its condition wouldn't deteriorate. Dandan leaned against the edge of the tub and worriedly stared at the little golden dragon, his soft and immature voice continuously asking, "Mother, will Long Long really be fine?" Little dragon just spoke about a way to treat him, so after we leave this sealed dragon domain we'll go find the whereabouts of Burning Heaven Realm. Going to Burning Heaven Realm will be able to cure Long Long? Then that's great, mother, we'll go immediately, The next moment, Heshi shoved something in Dandan's mouth, causing him to be unable to talk. After he had swallowed whatever was in his mouth, he exclaimed, "Mother, what was that? It's delicious." While laughing, Heshi stuffed one into the little golden dragon's mouth before she lightly said, "This is a 6th rank demon beast's core, I'm hoping that it'll have some effect on healing the wounds you two have." A 6th rank demon beast core contains an enormous amount of power, so you have to absorb it properly. Chapter 278, Nangong Yu was afraid. Currently, Dandan was feeling an immense amount of energy spreading throughout his body, making his previously empty stomach become warm and feel exceptionally comfortable. This feeling, compared to drinking spirit spring water and eating spiritual plants and fruits from the space, was much better. Promptly obeying Heshi, he closed eyes and began to absorb the energy. At the same time, the little golden dragon's breathing started to regulate while he was still unconscious. Watching Dandan's dried-up body slowly become rounded again, Heshi couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. So sitting cross-legged at the edge of the spring, she began to cultivate. Although she had just gotten the Maha inheritance, she was extremely interested in it. She believed that as long as she completely mastered the cultivation technique of the Maha inheritance, beating down Feng Lianying wouldn't even be an issue anymore. Time flowed and in the blink of an eye, one night had already passed. In the cave, Nangong Yu opened his eyes to examine his condition and was satisfied when he found that the injury to his meridians had nearly completed healing. His dried-up dantian had also been filled with spiritual power, while his strength was restored to at least 70%. Shier's 9th secluded spirit spring water was indeed the best healing medicine for martial artists, especially for superficial wounds and spiritual power depletion. It was simply 100 times more powerful than ordinary medicinal pills. Nangong Yu stood up and went to walk outside the cave, but just as he arrived at the entrance, his heart started palpitating. His figure suddenly rushed out, but there was only an empty area before his eyes. Apart from the occasional rustling of the purple abyss vine's leaves, Heshi was nowhere to be seen. 11R. Nangong Yu subconsciously shouted out loud, not even realizing that his voice was somewhat trembling due to fear. Why wasn't Sheer here? Did she get angry and disappointed so she left, completely cutting off all ties with him? Or did she encounter danger? With these thoughts swirling around in his mind, Nangong Yu felt like his throat was being tightly clutched, making it extremely difficult to breathe. But soon, he heard a strange whistling sound, and following that, Heshi gracefully floated down from above to firmly land in front of him. When Heshi had woken up in the morning and noticed that Nangong Yu was still meditating, she had gone to the top of the cliff alone to examine it first. She had even left the purple abyss vine guarding the entrance so that when Nan Gongyu awoke he would know that she hadn't just left. However, when she suddenly heard Nan Gongyu shouting, she had hurriedly come back down. She watched as Nan Gongyu stared at her, and just as she was about to speak, Nan Gongyu suddenly strode forward and pulled her into his arms. Nan Gongyu's strength was tremendous, and as he pressed her body against his, it nearly crushed her bones. "It hurts." She frowned and wanted to push him away, but she found that Nan Gongyu was actually trembling. His body holding her was cold, unlike the scorching temperature it normally was. So even though he tried to conceal it, she could still feel that his body was continuously trembling while he hugged her. Nan Gongyu was afraid. What was he afraid of? She was puzzled, but her body betrayed her reasoning, and reaching out her hand, she gently stroked his back as if she was comforting a child who'd been awakened by a nightmare. Her voice was gentle as she asked, "What happened?" Nan Gongyu tightened his hold on her and buried his face in her hair, refusing to speak for a long while. Just as He was about to ask again, Nan Gongyu abruptly released her and with a gloomy voice asked, "Where did you go? Why is there such a potent smell of blood coming from your body?" His voice was full of anxiety and anger, but it was also mixed with distress and worry. Nan Gongyu abruptly grabbed Heshi's hand and began to search for where she was injured. Chapter 279, "Tie you to my side." Heshi pushed him away, and with a blush covering her face she angrily said, "Where do you think you're touching? Pervert." "I'm fine. I wanted to take a look what's on the top of the cliff, and in passing I dealt with a few dark devil wolves." A dark devil wolf was a third-rank demonic beast. Although its cultivation base wasn't very high, they usually lived in packs, which meant that if you encountered one, it was the same as meeting a dozen of them. Even knowing that Heshi's current cultivation base was high enough to handle them, Nan Gongyu still had some lingering fears. "Why didn't you call me?" Heshi stared at him with puzzlement. Just a moment ago fear had been plastered across his face, but now it had clearly transformed into anger. Was he bipolar? "They're nothing but third-rank demonic beasts, I can easily deal with them." After saying that, she turned towards the cave to pack up, but after barely walking 2 steps, Nan Gongyu pulled her back. Heshi wanted to struggle free but found herself unable to now that Nan Gongyu's strength had been restored. There was no way she could fight him. Soon, Nan Gongyu's hand captured both of her wrists behind her back, while the other hand held her slender waist and firmly pressed her against his chest. "Next time, no matter what happens, don't ever leave me. Do you hear me?" Heshi angrily struggled and tried to break from his hold, but instead, she ended up being pressed tighter against him, resulting in almost no space left between the two of them. "Nan Gongyu, you might as well find a rope to tie me up with at this rate." Heshi had only said that because she was furious, but when Nan Gongyu heard it his eyes instantly lit up. "Good idea." Following that, a length of finger-thick golden silk appeared in his hand, and before Heshi had time to realize what was going on, he moved to tie her hands behind her back. This was a high-level spiritual weapon called golden silk. Flying swords were unable to cut it, while water and heat weren't capable of damaging it. If she was tied by that, would she still be able to escape? Heshi struggled with all her might. "Nan Gongyu, are you kidding me? Do you think I'm joking?" Nan Gongyu leaned closer to her ear and whispered in a hoarse voice, "Who told you to be so disobedient, always thinking of running away from me? Instead of always worrying about your safety, it's better to tie you to my side." Heshi felt the icy cold spiritual power of the golden silk wrap around her wrists and became extremely anxious. Before, even though she had used all of her spiritual power, she still hadn't been able to break free from Nan Gongyu's hands. "Sheer, I can untie you, but only if you'll promise me that you stay by my side at all times." How could Heshi currently dare to argue with this crazy man? A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him, so she hastily nodded and agreed. "All right, I'm afraid of you, so I'll promise you, will that do? Now quickly release me." With that, Nan Gongyu was satisfied and swiftly released her hands. Immediately jumping back a step, alertness and caution were on her face as she glared at him. These kinds of unyielding yet delicate eyes resembled the luminous eyes of a little leopard. Seeing them, Nan Gongyu felt his mind drift away and suddenly reached out his hands to pull her towards him. She abruptly felt herself moving backwards uncontrollably, and when she returned to her senses, she found herself once again in Nan Gongyu's embrace. Nan Gongyu lowered his head and passionately kissed her bright red lips. After a moment, once he released her lips, his voice was lower and softer, like a gentle flow of water. "Sheer, I've wanted to do that since a long time ago." She ferociously wiped her lips that were extremely painful from being kissed and angrily glared at him. Unfortunately, she didn't want to provoke this crazy man again, so she turned around to enter the cave. After she finished tidying up her stuff, the two quickly flew to the peak of the cliff. Yesterday, it had been Heshi carrying Nan Gongyu, but this time, regardless of Heshi's protests, Nan Gongyu had embraced her waist and carried her to the peak in only a moment. Chapter 280, Rumors. At the peak of the cliff there was a stretch of green hills, and not too far in the distance, there were the dead bodies of more than 10 dark devil wolves lying on the ground emitting the thick smell of blood. Before Heshi had time to take the bodies of the dark devil wolves into her space, Nan Gongyu wanted to help her and sliced downwards with his sword. Unfortunately, when his sword went to cut into the bodies of the dark devil wolves, it crushed them into dust and caused perfectly good food materials to be wasted. Heshi fiercely glared at Nan Gongyu, and seeing him rubbing his nose while looking helpless and awkward, she turned around and couldn't help but utter a soft laugh. She hadn't expected such an embarrassed expression on the almighty Hell King. It was so surprising that, it was very cute. Heshi had barely finished sorting out what was left of the dark devil wolves and was about to call out to Nan Gongyu that they could depart, when she suddenly sensed something and turned to gaze towards the distant sky. A moment later, a few figures flew over and abruptly landed in front of them. Before Heshi could get a clear look at who they were, she saw a black-clothed man step forward with large strides and drop to one knee in front of Nan Gongyu, greeting him with clasped hands. "Master, are you all right?" The person before them was Qing Long. Of course, it wasn't only Qing Long, there were also a few bodyguards from Hell King Manor, most of them high-level Meridian stage martial artists. But, what surprised Heshi the most, was that Gu Lufeng and Zhou Yan'an were also there. As soon as Gu Lufeng spotted Heshi, he slowly walked up to her and asked, "Little Yuer, are you okay?" Heshi didn't have time to reply before she felt something tighten around her hand, and by the time she realized what was happening, she had already been tugged behind Nan Gongyu. With a gloomy look on his face, he fixedly glared at Gu Lufeng, a dangerous light flashing within his eyes. "Young Master Gu, what did you think would happen when she's by my side?" Gu Lufeng stared blankly. Following which, he revealed a meaningful smile and lazily said, "There's no need for your Highness Hell King to be so petty. You two were opposing each other before, so I was unaware that you and little Yuer were companions. An exchange of blows may lead to friendship, and since your Highness Hell King won't hurt little Yuer, let's shake hands and get along." His explanation didn't make Nan Gongyu's expression better, it instead caused it to become darker. "Shut up. Who allowed you to call her little Yuer? Who would want to shake hands with you? Go far away from Sheer." Gu Lufeng looked at him with ridicule on his face and spread out his hands as he laughingly said, "You can say Sheer, yet I can't say little Yuer. Little Yuer, you say something, am I right?" Nan Gongyu pulled out his flying sword with his complexion as black as storm clouds. "You're courting death." Gu Lufeng seemed to be shocked as he took 3 steps backwards, but the expression in his peach blossom-like eyes was still relaxed, as if he was having fun teasing. Okay, in the future I'll call him Shiyu, that's okay, right?" Yet after a brief pause, he rubbed his chin while his line of sight swept back and forth between Nan Gongyu and Heshi. After what seemed to be a moment of contemplation, he meaningfully said, "This attitude of Hell King towards little Yuer, Shiyu, you can really make one's imagination run wild. It's just that, why was there a rumor on the streets about you and that ice lotus fairy? Your Highness Hell King, to be so hot and cold like this and have an affair, it's not good at all. Nan Gongyu was stunned. What rumor? Naturally it's a rumor surrounding your marriage. Gu Liufeng's charming peach blossom-like eyes widened. He was obviously still wearing a mask, but it gave people the perception of grace. It's well known that Hell King Manor will be connected by marriage to one of Mi Luo Continent's 4 large sects, Lu Li Sect, and that Hell King and Lu Li Sect's young clan head, Ice Lotus Fairy, had long found affinity with the other and that you'd been yearning for each other secretly all this time. As soon as Ice Lotus Fairy leaves her closed-door cultivation, breaking through to nascent soul stage, the two of you will finally forge an alliance. Your Highness Hell King, this news is known by everyone in Yanjing City, don't tell me that you don't know about this. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.